Very frosty. Okay, on a very frosty and chilly morning with me. There's certainly benefit of online meetings on mornings like this. So good. Welcome to our Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee, the first one of 2025. And a reasonable agenda today, some really important items on it, so we'll make a start. Item 1 on your agenda is apologies for absence.
The only apology I have, Chair, is from Emma Palmer, Chief Executive.
Okay, that's noted. Any others, members or officers? No. We'll move on to item 2 on your agenda, disclosure of interest, and similarly, declarations of party whip. Has anybody got anything to declare at 2 and 3?
No.
Okay, we move on to minutes, item 4 on your agenda, and that's the meeting of the 11th of September 24. We'll deal with those first. Can we ratify those, please? A true and correct record. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you. And similarly, has anybody got any comments to make on them meetings, or are they happy with them?
Happy.
And then moving on to the minutes of the 13th of November, which was a joint scrutiny. Can we sign them as a true and correct record as well? Yes, thank you. Hands everywhere. And similarly, anybody got anything they wanted to raise on any of those minutes, or can we now put them away? Okay, judging on your silence, we'll move on to item 5 on your agenda. It's the Brinslauer full business case. And is Councillor Pete in with us now?
Yeah, I'm in with you now.
Yeah, Councillor Pete, do you want to say anything on this before we go over to Marianne?
Yeah, I'll just introduce it briefly. I'm aware this is the first time we brought a full business case to this scrutiny committee. So I've asked Marianne Evans, who's going to take the lead on this from the officer side, to give a little bit of an explanation about the process and how we've got here at the start. But this is basically the final point in the process where we've gone through site selection, planning, all contract negotiations, and this is the point where we're going to Welsh Government with final figures, seeking final approval before we actually sign contracts and put the first spade in the ground for this site. So with no more than do on that, I'll pass you across to, I've seen Dr. Richard bring his camera up. So Richard, do you want to introduce this briefly, or do you want me to pass straight to Marianne?
Thank you, Councillor Pete. I think you can pass straight to Marianne. Thanks.
Thank you, Marianne. I'll let you take the scrutiny committee through this.
Can I just say, to begin with, this gives me great pleasure to be able to present this full business case to you as a scrutiny committee. It marks a key milestone, not only with this project, but also with our transformation programme. I've got officers on the call to support, so I can see I've got Simon Anderson, ALN manager, Jim Swaby, professional lead property. I've got Nancy from finance, Anwen and Richard. And if I've missed anybody, James Chappell is here as well from the capital finance as well. So those are the team this morning. So I've got a short presentation for you because I am aware that this is the first time a full business case has come in front of this committee. And Simon, can you share the presentation? It's short, but it will give you the context and sort of the key headlines about this project. Right, everybody, let me know when you can see. Can you see that? I can see it.
That's up with us, Marianne.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, we'll kick off with this one then. So this is a full business case. So if you move on to the next slide, Simon. Brilliant. So this is part of the Welsh Government Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, previously known fondly as the 21st Century Schools programme. This is the Welsh Government's major capital investment programme for education. It includes schools and it includes further education colleges. The programme investment objectives, I will remind you of these. What this programme is intending to achieve is to transform learning environments and learner experience. It aims to meet demand for school places, i.e. build new schools where needed. It aims to improve the condition and suitability of the Welsh education estate. It's also aimed at developing sustainable learning environments, and we're on the net zero carbon journey. And also it's around supporting the community. So there's a key driver within the Welsh Government around community-focused schools, and that's all part of this programme. So that gives you the context of what the programme is. If you move on. I think this is an important slide because it sets out where we are with the journey of this project. So Welsh Government require all local authorities to submit business cases. You'll be aware of this. We have to follow quite a rigid process of the HM Treasury's 5-case business model. And the 5 cases are strategic, where we look at the case for change, the economic case, where we consider what options are there to address the issues, and that's where the option appraisal element comes in. It then considers the commercial case, i.e. the procurement routes, the financial case, and the management case, so how the project will be managed. So all 5 cases are scrutinised at different levels within a 3-stage business case process. So the first one is the strategic outline case, or what we call the SOC. You will have heard this as well. Now, this is where we set the high-level strategic direction. This is where the case for change is put forward and options. We then move on to the outline business case, where further economic evaluation is carried out of those options, and that is where the preferred option appears. And then we have the full business case, which is the one that we're looking at today, which is where we examine whether the solution is affordable. So this is post-procurement, i.e. that we've tendered, we've got a contractor on board, but before the contract is signed. So a little bit of context about Bryn Llewellyn School. There's a lot of information in the documents, but just to summarise, it is a school for children and young people with significant behavioural, emotional and social difficulties. It's our only BESD school in the council, and it accommodates pupils from right across the county. It's situated in Kerry, just outside of Newtown. It currently has 77 on roll at Bryn Llewellyn with 8 at Bryn Bach. So we have a satellite centre down in Ystrad. And it's a school that caters for pupils aged 7 to 19. So it's got a larger age range. The case for change, again, there's quite a lot of detailed information within the documents, but in summary, it's a very poor condition building. Those of you who know Bryn Llewellyn or have ever been there will know it's in a Grade 2 listed mansion house, which is in extremely poor condition. It's a condition D school, and D meaning it is the worst of the condition categories. We have recently had to mothball the top floor and the second floor of the mansion house due to issues we're having. There's a range of other buildings around as well, assortment of buildings around the school as well that are used. Suitability is a concern. So the children at this school, children and young people at this school have significant needs. And then there's a question around whether the suitability of the school helps support them in their teaching and learning, and whether the site layout as well is suitable for these children. You can see from the documents that we feel that the case for change is strong here in terms of the need to improve the school buildings. Okay. Just a quick overview of the project. This has been in development for quite a long time. It was originally in our Band B, 21st Century Schools, which is the last round of projects, and then it's now moved into the new round of projects, and it's included within our strategic outline programme approved by Cabinet last year. So it started in 2018-19 with the development of a strategic case. A lot of research went in at that time. We explored potential sites across the county, because one of the questions that we had at the time was whether Bryn Llewellyn is actually in the right place to serve the whole of Powys. And we considered a number of sites, and we, through that site selection process, we ended up with Bryn Llewellyn being the appropriate site at the time. So in 2020, a combined SOC OBC was approved by Cabinet and then by Welsh Government. And then following the development of outline designs, we carried out a tender exercise in 2021, which saw the appointment of ISG Construction at that point, and they were awarded the contract. So they then developed the designs further up to REBA 4, which is the last stage of design, and that was completed in 2023. But, and that's a big but, this is where ISG then presented the costs for the design, which were just below 15 million. Now, the cost exceeded the funding envelope that we had approved at SOC OBC stage quite significantly. So following some work to try and bring these costs down, it then appeared that it was really difficult to bring them down significantly. So we took the decision to terminate the contract with ISG, thankfully, and then we re-tendered. We also submitted planning as well at that stage. So following the re-tender, we've now appointed SJ Roberts to take forward the final design and then on to construction, again, subject to Cabinet and Welsh Government approvals. And then we've also prepared the full business case. 2025, hopefully now we'll get the full business case approved by Cabinet and then by Welsh Government. Site preparation begins and we'll start on site in sort of around July time. And then in 2026, the school will open. So just a little bit of detail about the new replacement school. It's being built on land adjacent to the current school. So it's on the same site as Bryn Llewellyn is now. The design is based on a building bulletin 104 for special schools, which determines and sort of provides guidance around how special schools should be developed and designed. Significant to this, it provides a smaller ratio of pupils per class than for mainstream schools. So the new replacement school will have 7 basic teaching classrooms, which then gives you 64 places. But then in addition, there's a 6th form area, 3 specialist classrooms, external workshops, there's a hall, a community space, and then other staff accommodation. So overall, there's unusable spaces for teaching and learning of around 84 places. And again, it's built to a low energy design. Right, we come to costs. So the total capital cost is 12.7 million. The funding allocation then is split between Welsh Government and Powys County Council. As a special school, Welsh Government has an increased contribution here of 75%, which is 9.5. So the council's contribution is 25%, which is 3.1 million. Some financial implications for you to consider. So here the cost is higher than the SOC OBC funding envelope of 9.1. However, it is significantly lower than the cost that ISG provided to us following their design. If this was to be fully funded by borrowing, we estimate it would cost 175,000 per year for 34 years, unless capital receipts are identified that would bring that borrowing cost down. We've compared the costs with the cost of refurbishing, and they came in at about 12.6 million. So you can see they're there or thereabouts in terms of a new build versus the refurbishment. We will draw down some additional Welsh Government funding based on meeting the net zero carbon targets. We'll know what those are once we get a grant award letter. We estimate a revenue saving of 69,000 per year in the school's funding formula, and we will also remove the backlog maintenance cost of 3.8 million, which currently stands at the school. And then the final slide, the benefits. So the benefits of this project is not only in terms of improving the learner environment for both pupils and staff at the school. We will remove that additional backlog maintenance cost. Again, I'll point out that the backlog maintenance cost would have to be funded by the council fully. It will meet the Welsh Government's aspirations for net zero carbon in operation, and it will provide a long-term sustainable solution with a school which has a life expectancy of approximately 60 years compared to the short-term fix that ongoing maintenance would provide. And I leave it there. Thank you for allowing me to give you the presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Diolch, Marianne. We've obviously had a pre-meeting in relation to this item, and many of the questions you've answered in your presentation. I just would like some ground rules, some clarity really now at this stage, because it's a full business case. What do you feel that Scrutiny can add to this now that it's so far down the line? A lot of the questions that came out in the pre-meet, yes, you've answered, but they're also questions or ideas that would have been influenced in the beginning, like, for example, is this the right site? Well, there's little point in us asking that question today now, is it? I just wonder what we as Scrutiny can add to this now.
Can I come in?
Yeah, go on.
You know, some of the questions that we've already had amongst ourselves as officers and in the different boards are around, are we building the school big enough?
Okay.
Because of pupil numbers and demand. So that is something that we have had some thought about. Welsh Government have also asked the question, are we building it big enough? There's questions around where do we go next? So if we're building in Bryn Llywar, is there an option at some future date for equity across the county, and should we be looking towards a similar
Okay.
the south as?
All right then. Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Let's let it run. But members, you're aware of my thoughts now, and hopefully that will influence your question. Angela's first up, please. Welcome, Councillor Angela.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with you. I think maybe Marianne has read our minds a little bit there, because a lot of our questions were answered. However, we're talking about the location and the catchment of the school. And within the strategic case made in 2018-19, it was confirmed to yourselves that this was the right location. Just want to check, you know, post-COVID and the changes and challenges our pupils face, are we still confident now, 5 years on, that it is still the best location?
Yes, I think it is the best location because of when we were looking at site selection, we were looking at which not only where was it best strategically, but where was it best in terms of operationally, where can we build? So obviously Bryn Llywar is there. The services were already there, etc. So that is also in council ownership, which was a key factor at the time. And we looked at a number of areas in council ownership, but we didn't really, this was the best one of the lot at the time. Having said that, you know, I do feel Bryn Llywar, if you look at where the pupils come from, the majority come from Montgomeryshire for what it's worth. And then the Breconshire ones tend to go down to Bryn Bach, and there's a smattering then from Mid Powys. So the question for me is, okay, it serves the demand in Montgomeryshire, but actually, because it's there, does that mean that that's where the pupils come from? So really, should we then be
if it were somewhere else, would the pupils come from somewhere else? And we wouldn't know that unless we had 2 or 3 of the same style and type of school, would we really?
That is, I think following on from sort of building Bryn Llywar here now and replacing the school, consideration must be given to, you know, equity across the county and whether we need a second site elsewhere at a point in time.
But from what you're saying then, in terms of this building in North Powys, the demand is there and this building is in the right place to meet that demand. We can't hand on heart say it meets the whole of Powys's demand.
Not the whole of Powys, but it
No.
meets demand.
Could I ask a second question, Chair, if that's all right?
Yeah, go for it.
It's just to check my facts. So we're saying that the maintenance costs of the existing building, the maintenance backlog, is 3.8 million. Are we talking millions?
Yes.
Yeah. But the Powys contribution, the 25% to building the new build, is 3.1829. So it's less money to to contribute for the new build than it is to continue with the old. Right, I've got that right. So yes, because the finances are scary, really, aren't they? But actually, when you compare the two, it sort of seems obvious. Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Marianne.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Angela. Just to develop Councillor Angela's question a little bit more, what is the relationship with the satellite school in Ystrad Gunlais? Just give us a brief how you envisage that working or how it does work, Marianne, please.
I'll bring Simon in because
Okay.
he's closer than I am.
Thank you. So the Brimbach, which is the satellite, is a class within Maisaderwin High School. It's actually got a suite of classrooms rather than just one classroom. It's fully staffed with specialist trained teachers and LSAs. They come from Brynslawak, and the head teacher is almost like an executive head over both, so he has oversight of both of those. And we have young people, mainly, as Marianne said, from the Brecon and Ystrad Gunlais area. We only have around 8 learners in there currently. And we probably wouldn't have many space for many more learners just due to the complexity and size of the spaces. But it does work very well. We consulted with our head teacher colleagues in the Ystrad Gunlais area about what they would want and how they would see it, and this was our gift to them after what they told us. So that's really successful, and we see it continuing in the future.
Okay, thank you, Simon. That will help us in our thoughts as well. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I pick up on a point that Angela made? I think the other important thing we need to note around the finances, yes, the backlog repairs and maintenance is 3.1 million, but bringing it up to the 21st century school standard through refurbishment is 12.6 million. So, and that would have to be 100% funded by the county council. You know, this school's been needing replacing for, I don't know, I don't know how long I worked in the county council, but for a long time. My questions are to start with, and I've got 23 questions, but I some of it is quite picky. My question is, how does the authority meet the needs of the children in South Randeshire, North Breconshire that are BESD? Because, you know, I know this school quite well. Historically, most of the children have come from, as Marianne said, comes from the Welshpool, Newtown, Llandrunded, a bit from the John Beddoes. But how are the children in Crickhowell, Gwynavid, Bilth, part of Brecon, how are their needs met with BESD? Because, you know, this is, in my mind, partly, if you've got a facility, we'll fill it. And I think perhaps it's a question maybe for Simon or Anwin. The other aspect of that is looking at the sustainable powers policy. It says that services should be accessible within 1 hour of travel. Well, there's no way on earth people from my ward would be able to get to Brentlow within 1 hour of travel.
Okay, there's 2 questions there. Anybody fancy having a stab at that?
Simon, do you want to go first on first question?
So in terms of the those areas, I mean, quite honestly, we're not seeing the need arise from those areas currently. That's not to say in the future there wouldn't be the numbers. There's nothing we can do about the distance, and that is an issue and something we are very aware of. However, specialist transport is put on for learners to Brynslawak, and the school actually put on members of staff from their own team to support those learners on those journeys.
Okay, just building on that a little bit then, Simon, what are the other schools doing in mainstream to stop the need for that support that schools in Welshpool, Newtown, etc. aren't doing? Or is it just because the provisions there were filling it?
It's a difficult one to answer that, Gareth. I wouldn't say that one school is doing anything maybe better than another school, but I think potentially that the need in the community isn't necessarily there. So they're not experienced maybe the same level of complexity that maybe learners from Welshpool Newtown area are kind of demonstrating maybe.
Okay. So there could be considered an inequality of provision then, or access to provision.
In terms of transport time, yes.
No, I'm thinking of access to suitable provision.
Well, that provision would always be, that we wouldn't say you couldn't go to Bryn Llawr or you couldn't go to Brimbach. That would always be open to them. It's just the journey times, I think, which is maybe the inequality.
So only pupils in Bryn Llawr at the moment come from the John Beddoes, Llandrinded, Bilthwells catchments.
I could find that out. I'd have to look that one up for you, Gareth.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Gareth, yeah, I think your point is made in relation to equity. Yeah. And yes, the second part of that question, Gareth, just remind us again, sorry.
Yeah, within sustainable Paris, one of the key one of the key standards is travel of an hour.
Mm.
Yeah, I'll come back on that. I think we are where we are with Bryn Llawr. It is where it is. But for me, I think it's right. I think and I think if we are going to stick to that principle, then we really have to look at whether the provision is equitable across the county, and then that's a conversation again for, are we going to have a second site of a Bryn Llawr somewhere in the south? I have to say as well, I'm going to have to make this point. Children travel to Bryn Llawr from quite far distances, and they're travelling far over the hour, and these are our most vulnerable pupils. So I just want to put that out there. There's a lot of commitment with parents who choose Bryn Llawr if they have to travel these distances. But what they get when they get there is fantastic. So, but again, I think this will be a conversation we will be having over the next few years about whether there's a second site.
Okay, I'm coming back to you, Gareth. Is there anything else you want to add at this stage, or are you going to see if somebody has questions?
I'll see. I've got lots of questions, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Chloe, welcome, Chloe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for the presentation. I was just wanted to, it's kind of been touched on already, but I wanted to get a bit more information about the capacity. From everything we hear at the moment, the need for schools and spaces is growing all the time, and it doesn't seem like there's a huge amount of leeway in spaces at this school compared to what there is currently. So if the need were to grow over coming years, are we going to end up with a situation where we don't have enough space? And then kind of linked to that really is, at the moment, the current provision, I think, is for only 8 sixth form students. I wondered how many there are at the moment and how many we're predicting coming through for the sixth form there. And then the last one, just for information really, was to get a bit of clarification on those CADU discussions around the old mansion house and what might happen to it. Obviously, it's right next to the new school site, so it'd be interesting to know what people are thinking of, what their sort of discussions are around how it might be used in future.
Thank you, Chloe. 2 questions there then, really. And Marianne, you did touch on the capacity in your introduction as well. So
okay,
I'll be coming back to you, Marianne, yeah.
This is quite an interesting one in terms of capacity and projections. We don't calculate projections for special schools in the same way as we project for mainstream schools. So that information isn't really there. So we've set it as a general projection of around 80 pupils in Bryn Llawr over the next few years. Although we do know demand now, and you can see from the information in the document, the demand it has increased. If you look back over the years, Bryn Llawr was sort of around the 70s. Then it dropped significantly, and then it's back on the rise. So when we started the design process, we were probably in the middle of that dip, and that's sort of where our starting point was. If you look at the design itself, so as I said, there's 7 classrooms there which accommodate 64 pupils based on a pupil ratio of 8 per class. But there are the rooms there, so there are 3 specialist rooms. There's a lot of external workshops, etc. So pupils can be accommodated there. The school itself, and I know, and when Richard could come in here in terms of how the school, or Simon, sorry, how the school how the school operates, and it operates very creatively and is able to manage the pupils in a different way to other schools. Having said that, we future-proof all our buildings. So we know if there's demand here that the building could be extended. It's been designed in that way so that we could have an extension there. So that's where we are. However, and I will go back to it, you know, Bryn Llywelyn will only accommodate so much, and that is when we have to think about whether another site is required. So that's on the space. I don't know, Richard, do you want to come in around?
Yeah, yes, please, if you would. Just around the point you made about essentially the relationship between the space in a school and the way a school is designed and the curriculum. And what we've got in Bryn Llywelyn, and we have this now, is a really energetic school that's embraced curriculum for Wales. So lots of different learning activities in different spaces. And the new school has been designed in a way which will allow them to develop that approach to embracing the new curriculum. So what that allows a school to do then is have different group sizes, different groups of individuals working in different spaces across the school, which ultimately leads to greater flexibility around timetabling then. So, you know, we've been able to ensure that the space is designed for what the curriculum needs to look like and grow into as well. Diolch.
Okay, and just to finalise Chloe's questions in relation to the old building.
Yeah, and there's a question around the number of sixth formers as well, wasn't there? So
Okay.
we've got around 15, I think, in post-16 provision across years 12, 13 and 14 there currently, according to Teacher Centre. In terms of the building itself, so the current building will be available for a capital receipt. It is CADU listed, and that will give us a little bit of a risk around disposing of the building. But you know, we think that that's the route to go, unless there's any other use for the current mansion house. But as I've said, you know, it is in a poor condition anyway, and the costs of refurbishing would be extremely high. But it would be open to capital receipts, and what we'll need to do is engage with CADU. You know, once the decision has been made to move and build a new building, we will engage with CADU straight away and explore opportunities there. We probably need to get it on the market as soon as possible once it's empty.
Okay,
Chair, can I
Jim.
come back quickly on that? Is that?
Yeah, no, Chloe, let's, I think Jim's put his hand up and I guess he's got something to add. He may answer your question. Welcome, Jim.
Good morning. Thank you, Councillor Gwynfor. Yeah, just to add to Marianne, we've had the conversations with property colleagues and sorry, I'm not sure my video has gone off. Had conversations with property colleagues and previously discussed with CADU. So CADU are aware of the council's broad intentions. Of course, finalising the discussions is dependent upon the new school taking place. So it's trying to get things lined up. But those conversations have begun. They'll be taken on with greater earnest after this.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, Chloe, welcome to come back.
Thank you. Just quickly, I just feel this is like an opportunity if we're building a new school and we get the investment from Welsh Government to make sure we've got the capacity to have that extra space. You know, if numbers of pupils are going to increase over time, and it doesn't. I know Marianne's mentioned having the extensions. I know how tight budgets are. Whether it's worth, you know, having one of those extensions, having an extra classroom for now when we get the additional Welsh Government funding to put the building in place. So yeah, that was my last one. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chloe. Thanks for that point. Councillor Aled.
Thank you, Chair. It's been a long time coming. Previous cabinet took the decision to go ahead with a new build. It's crumbling around people's ears, as you can see from the backlog in maintenance. Couple of questions, well, partly following on from previous question from Chloe. Obviously, CADU have been involved in the planning application because of the proximity of it. But does the proximity of the new school compromise the value of the assets if you wanted to market it in the future? Has that been properly thought through? But saying that, I don't want to delay the progress of this at all, but I assume that's been properly thought through. And this delay and the retendering has saved a certain amount of money. But have there been compromises in the design to reduce the value? Because the cost to the council is only 600,000. when you take away 25% of the difference. So what compromises, if any, have been made in the design and the specifications of the new build, and will that have a detrimental impact on the learners that go there? It's as I said, and the future provision and how this fits into our ALN strategy. We had that presentation from Simon a couple of months ago. It was highly praised, but here comes rub, isn't it? It's the equity of provision across the county. The strategy is great, but this is how do you get that equity of provision across the county? You have satellite support in some areas, non-existent support for children in other areas. You've got huge taxi bills for transporting people a long way to this place because it's labor intensive. So it's not just an ordinary taxi. There's probably supervised taxis in many cases. So I wonder, and it's more of a fundamental question really for the portfolio holder. How is he making sure that county-wide provision is equitable and equally accessed for all children going forward? Sorry, there's a few questions in there, Chair.
Yeah, no, absolutely fine, Aled. Jim, I'm going to come to you for the first two questions in relation to site, etc., and then we'll come to Simon and Councillor Pete for the rest of them. So, Jim, please.
Thank you very much, and Councillor Aled, it has been a long time coming. Very welcome to get here. In terms of the location of the new building, it's actually quite a low disruption from the building. It's very discrete in form, and it's separated from the main mansion house by a degree of planting, including the wildlife area that extends there. So there is separation, and that was evidenced in the discussion and planning application. So we're happy with that, and that followed a conversation with the valuation team as well earlier on. In terms of potential compromise, I'm not aware of any compromise in terms of the design. The areas are unchanged, the specifications unchanged in terms of finishes and fittings. What we did when we went out to the market again was to open it to contractors' choice on key elements like frame, and of course, the structural frame in the building is not to have any impact on teaching whatsoever, but it did have quite an impact on the price that we were being presented with. So I can assure you there's no compromise.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. It's important to understand. And the lifespan of the building is exactly the same as well.
Absolutely the case, yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, we'll go over to Simon now, and also Councillor Pete, in relation to how does this school fit in with the AL Vision document, which we scrutinised. I think it was in our previous meeting, actually. Simon.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, Councillor, that's a real pertinent point you've made. And of course, the new build is intrinsically linked to the ALN and Inclusion Strategic Plan, so it's not being done in silo. So it enhances the support we're going to be offering to our mainstream schools. Also looking at how we are utilising all of the suite of new qualifications that are coming through for learners post 14, which is going to have a massive impact on how learners engage within their mainstream schools. And the new qualifications will really help learners who have behaviour, emotional, social difficulties. We're then going to our full stakeholder consultation in terms of community hubs and inclusion hubs as well, and looking at how we can make sure we've got the relevant provision in areas where there might not be provision. And also enhancing what's in communities as well, and also enhancing the outreach that comes from our special schools too. So within the whole strategic plan, we are linking with the new build from Breslau, the new build from Robert Owen, and working with our head teachers from those special schools to enhance the offer we already have.
As Simon frozen.
Yeah, okay, I can hear you, Aled. I think Simon froze.
I just follow up on to Simon, really. We've had the promise of satellites for Kedawain in high schools before now. We've had a number of promises around satellite provision across the county, but they never materialise. Are there clear plans for the way forward?
So the satellites were, as you say, Councillor Allard, from the previous strategy, and there were mitigating circumstances around the third satellite, which we've not been able to deliver on because we found actually in that locality it probably wouldn't have been the most appropriate provision. That we have reviewed the satellites, and we are finding that the potentially could be different ways of doing things again. Certainly, the Brimbach satellite has been very positive and supports our learners and the needs that we have within that locality. But with this new build and with the looking at how we support outreach better, there may be that we can secure those extra resources through that to deliver these changes at pace, to deliver the support we need sooner in our mainstream schools, rather than actually having to put our children elsewhere and take them to different settings. So that's our vision, making sure that we've got the skills within our mainstream schools and supporting our mainstream schools to deliver in-house. And then when we've got those most complex needs, and that's, I think, a really key point to remember, that the special school placements are really for our most complex learners. And that's why the class sizes are so much smaller, the numbers within the schools are so much smaller, but then there's a higher number of staff to support those complex needs as well. So it's about reframing that as well, because one of the phrases I keep using is about the new norm. Ratios and thresholds have changed significantly over the last 4 or 5 years, and the level of need and complexity that's coming through is so much higher. So our special schools are having to gear their delivery up to deliver that much more complex need, and so we're having to also ensure that our mainstreams can cope and support the learners who maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago may have been in special schools.
Thank you, Simon, for a comprehensive answer there. Content, Aled?
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. So some of my questions were related to pupil numbers, so I'll leave that. Although there was just one technical point, that on page 6 of the Cabinet Executive Summary, there's a table there that refers to the minimum number of pupils that can be accommodated. Should that be the maximum number of pupils that could be accommodated?
And just to add to that, Lucy, Councillor Gareth has put a comment in the chat about the capacity figure is very unclear, as in the table in 3114, the numbers could be a maximum capacity of 97. So we're a little bit confused. Councillor Lucy and Gareth, different ends of the scale, but a bit of confusion.
So, and then my main question is about the community aspect of the school, around what's the existing capacity in Kerry? Is there a village hall, for instance, and will there be the demand for that community access to the school, just to ensure that the money's well spent in that aspect? Thank you.
Okay, I'll come back on those. In terms of your queries around those figures, we'll check them. If you can send me the references, I'll check them before it goes on to Cabinet. In terms of the community room, as I said, community-focused schools are a key part of the Welsh Government's programme. And maybe the term community is wrong, because what we're looking at is a room that can be used by a number of different organisations, and they could be organisations coming in to support the pupils, etc. So it is a space that can be used for that kind of support provision, but then also it could be an income generator for the school should they wish to bring in other community groups. So it is a usable space. That's what I'd call it, more than maybe a community room. It can be whatever it needs to be to anybody. So. Okay.
Okay, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you. I guess that, I mean, I accept that it's something that the Welsh Government want to see, but is it actually providing good value for money in terms of what we need in that school?
It's also a space that can be used. We've talked about the pupil numbers, and have we got enough space? It's a space. It's an additional space that can be used by pupils. So I think it's a valuable asset to the building.
But there is other community facilities in Kerry. Councillor Bryn, croeso.
Diolch yn iawn, Cadeirydd. Da ni wedi clywed dipyn am cydraddoldeb darpariaeth o ran teithio ac yn y blaen. Be 'di'r sefyllfa erbyn hyn? Faint o darpariaeth cyfrwng Cymraeg sy'n gallu cael ei roi gan yr ysgol i gefnogi plant? Dydy'r ysgol ei hun ddim yn newid, mae'n debyg, mae jyst adeilad ydy hwn yn y trech, ond oes yna ystyriaeth wedi cael ei roi i gefnogi teuluoedd Cymraeg eu hiaith fel datblygiadau yma?
Mi ddoi o Simon mewn, ond mae'r ysgol yn hynod gefnogol i'r Gymraeg. Mai ysgol cyfrwng Saesneg yw hi, maen nhw'n gefnogol iawn i'r Gymraeg, a mae yna waith yn cael ei wneud mwyn upskillio staff. Mae yna staff rhugl y Gymraeg yn yr ysgol, a mae yna gynlluniau ar y gweill gyda'r ysgol i darparu criw Cymraeg, a mae'n gwneud y gwaith siarter iaith ac yn y blaen. Simon, do you want to come in on the Welsh medium aspect of Bryn Llewarch?
I'm really sorry, the translation didn't come through.
Oh,
So,
right. Okay, I was just saying Bryn Llewarch are really committed to the Welsh language. Even though they're an English medium school, there's a lot of work going on there to enhance this, the pupil skills and also the staff skills as well. There are 2 teachers there who are fluent in Welsh as well. There's work going on to establish a criw Cymraeg, and there's work around chapter iaith going on, supported by officers from the Education Service as well. Simon?
No, absolutely, and they're very much committed as well to Welsh identity as well, and that's very strong at the school, and they're very passionate about promoting Welsh culture and Welsh identity. They do a lot of incidental Welsh, and as you said, they have members of staff who are fluent in Welsh, and they are increasing the amount of teaching that happens in Welsh as well.
Good.
Diolch. Yeah.
Coming back, Bryn?
Yeah, no.
No. Catherine.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you. I'm really pleased to see the plan. Having visited the school, I can attest to the great need for it, and I know the school are very excited about all the opportunities that a new build will bring them. I also had concern over capacity. Obviously, I have a personal connection with it in that my daughter currently has not been able to secure a place there and desperately needs it because of the lack of capacity, even at 77 now of the existing building. And I know she's not alone. So I am concerned that we're not making it large enough, but I'm pleased to hear that you have already thought that through, and obviously the Welsh Government have also echoed that thought. One question I did have was around disruption to the existing students, because I did note that there was some concern from Highways around the access to the building sites, and I wasn't quite clear on whether whether it's going to affect the school as it currently stands with the site the way it is. It is awkward to get to the build site. So yeah, if you could just give some clarity on the disruption to current students. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come in, and then Jim, you've probably got more information here. Safeguarding of children while the work's on site is the #1 priority. So just to say that is there. Jim, do you want to come in more on the?
Yeah, just very briefly, Councillor. There's a traffic management plan's been put in place, and we'll be looking to bring heavy loads in from. There's 2 main approaches, and we've had a lot of discussion with Highways about those particular routes. It's intended that it should not mean any disruption to the existing school during the operation. On the contrary, what we've found in the past, where we've built close to existing schools, and in many examples much closer than this, is that the new construction has been an opportunity for pupils in the school. They can get some learning experience from that development that's taking place. It's a unique opportunity for them.
Thank you.
Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, could I just have clarity when this is going to Cabinet? Because I think there's some actions required, because there's in my mind, there's an awful lot of differences between the report and the business case. For example, the square meterage, it's stated differently. The figures don't add up. In the business case, the numbers of 2019 are stated differently in the same paragraph. One stated as 42 when the table shows 52. So I just want to know what timetable between now and the cabinet.
Yeah, Gareth, it's going to cabinet on the 4th of February, if I'm right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you send through any things you found from scrutinising the documents, we'll happily do the check. We've already checked, but obviously there's a few things that we haven't picked up.
Isn't that person's roles to do that check and then send it back to us to actually do a final check on the report?
Well,
You know, for example, at the start in paragraph 1.1, you've got it shown as the figure in pence. And then when you go to the business case, the figure is shown in pence again, but it's a different number. It's 74 pence in the one and 78 pence in the other. You know, it's just silly mistakes and things aren't adding up. No, even the comment on sustainable powers, it says that the authority is facing a possible deficit over £60 million. Well, that's changed. It just needs to be updated for the current situation in my mind.
Okay, if we can have those comments, we've got 23 points, Gareth, and send them through.
No, they're coming down a bit, Marianne.
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Gareth finished. Councillor Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to reassure Catherine in her comments about what would happen on the site when the new school was being built. Having lived through 4 new schools and remodelling of a high school here in Estraganlas, I'd just like to reassure Catherine about how Powys dealt with it. I thought it was hard. Obviously, it was hard because a lot of schools were built on the same sites, but the Powys did their best, and I think it was absolutely seamless, to be fair, with the amount of work that was done and the way they conducted themselves. So please, Catherine, don't be alarmed about it. If they do with you as they did with us, it'll work, and they did the best. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Lots of comments coming in the chat as well. So if officers, if you want some assistance in some of the questions that have been asked, there's some questions in the chat. We seem to have explored all questions. There's nobody waiting, and I think we're all in agreement that it's a really financially viable thing to do to build this school. The one thing which I'm really concerned about, and Marianne, please, you did explain the timescale surrounding this, but it has been a very slow development of our transformation process, and in some respects, the delay in this has slowed down the rest of our transformation. Councillor Pete, I'm coming to you really. I just don't see that urgency in transformation, and we've got to a situation now where things are becoming very financially unviable because of our budget situation, and looks like in this case we've got a transformation project which is taking years to be fulfilled, and I find that disappointing really, because if nothing else, the present school is eating money. So Councillor Pete, have you got a comment on transformation and the delay that this has taken to get past the post? Because as the document identifies, it was a decision taken by the previous cabinet.
I would agree with you. It is disappointing, but we have to remember we're going through a planning process in many as well. And this school was subject to a delay during that planning process when there was a request for ministerial intervention. So we lost the best part of 3 months there. But the challenge of transformation, and we have this discussion on a number of occasions, and you will see this in a paper that I've asked officers to prepare, is one of pace, and it's one of pace that's being delivered. In respect of where we are moving forward, we have had delays on this one, but we have 3 phases to go through. And that is not a slow process. And I was looking back before this meeting at the audit report on Ysgol Calan Cymru from back the previous administration, and the need for us to go through the business cases borne out by that. So we will see improvements in speed now. We've got 2 other projects at earlier stages in the process that have been delayed briefly while we look at the cost of using different build methods. But beyond that, they will be ready to come to Cabinet in the next probably 6 weeks. And we've got proposals being developed in terms of the structural organisation of schools around how we can accelerate that. That will be coming as a briefing to Cabinet, might be coming to scrutiny. I'm not finalised exactly how we're going to manage that one yet in the next couple of weeks. But I just wanted to go back to point. I think it was Councillor Allard asked me a question, and it got lost a little bit, and that was around equity of provision. It's actually something Marianne and I talked about yesterday in our prep meeting. And I think there are opportunities that are emerging in the South, but I don't want to prejudge the work that Simon is going to be doing around the ALN strategy, because the desire of myself and generally, I think, is that these schools should be the absolute last resort. We should be looking to ensure that these pupils, if it is at all possible, receive a mainstream education so that they can enter a mainstream workplace, be prepared for that. So it is on my radar, it's on Marianne's radar, and it's on Simon's radar. But I think we need to let the strategy progress before we start rushing forward with other proposals elsewhere in the county. One positive, though, is that we own the plans for this site and we own the plans for this building. And if this meets requirements, we do have a set of plans that we could look at relocating onto another location, which will hopefully make that process a little bit quicker, because we haven't got to go through that huge amount of design work in a future occasion.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Pete. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. In 5.6 and 5.8 in the report, it gives figures about the savings on the formula, 69,000 in the one and additional up to 15k in the other. I'm just wondering, are they net of each other? So does the 69,000 include the 15 grand on energy, or is that in effect reducing the saving down to 54,000? And the other one is, in the report it says that the 175,000 capital cost is going to be paid for 34 years. At the end of that 34 years, does that mean that all that loan against Bryntlawr has been paid off? And perhaps that's a question for James.
Okay.
I'll bring finance colleagues in here. So
Nancy's got her hand up, Marianne.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Gareth, in terms of those 2 comments, in terms of the bullet points on the revenue, the £69,000 is the saving on the rerun of the funding formula. So that's the funding the school would get would be less because of the premises. The element then we mentioned in 5.8 is anticipation with regards to additional utility costs that the school would then bear and have to bear as part of their anticipated revenue spend. So what we've got at the moment is a lot of the new builds where, as it says and sets out in the paragraph, we're seeing increased costs, even though they are updated and they are new builds. around the technology element, which obviously I'd have to bring Jim in around the technicalities of that, but that's a very, very high level estimate, and we'd have to work with the school and the energy management officer and property to review that as for the expected utilities budgets the school would need to have in place, as we would do for any of the maintenance, etc. as well, in terms of their budgets. Thank you.
Okay, Nancy, excuse my ignorance here now. So do you create a separate borrowing line for Bryn Llawach in this instance then?
No, what we do
No.
is if they, for example, now, Chair, they get £2.2 million in their funding formula based on a square meterage of the existing school. When we do the formula savings that are built in 5.6, we rerun the funding formula using the updated information that we've got around the floor area, and that then generates the revised funding the school would receive.
Right.
And then what we do is once that funding gets to the school, and we do this with other new builds as well, we would then review all their maintenance budgets that they've set for the forthcoming years based on a new build. We'd work with the energy management team to look at some estimates around whether there were increasing costs that they'd need to build in, and the same with their property care elements as well. So we'd have to obviously review all those budgets with the school themselves on an individual basis. This is just highlighting as part of the report that we are seeing increased costs to the schools around the utilities with regards to new builds.
Okay, I'm glad somebody understands that. James, you look as if you're coming in on this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Councillor Gareth raised the borrowing. It's the council's policy to repay its debt over the average life of the assets involved. Obviously, Bryn Llawach's got quite a substantial life, should be a 60-year building, but of course the capital expenditure renewal will be made up of all different sorts of assets. So the average is generally 34, 35 years, but when you take that into account, all the different types of assets. So over that sort of 35-year time, we should have repaid that debt.
So should that figure actually be 60 years in the report then?
It's a possibly not. But we repay our MRP policy is over the average average life of the assets on which expenditure is incurred during the year. So in that year, we will have some of Bryn Llawach, we'll have costs for highways, we'll have costs for other schemes which will have shorter lives than this. So the average life for the last 5-6 years is 34, 35 years. So that's where we'd end up on that one. As a
I know the report does say about the 60-year expected life as well.
Yeah.
Okay, James, just to develop that further. So Marianne mentioned depending on capital receipts. So how does, if capital receipts comes into those figures, how does it affect the figures which are quoted in the report?
So £1 million worth of capital receipts, £1 million worth of borrowing costs on average sort of £55,000-60,000 per year to repay over the 34 years. So obviously, if we have £1 million of capital receipts instead of £1 million for borrowing, that would reduce that 175k by sort of 55,000-60,000, depends on the borrowing rate at the time. So obviously, if we could get the full 3-point-something million in capital receipts, there'd be no borrowing costs.
Okay, so what a considerable item that is. Councillor Bryn.
Diolch, ie. Ar hyd yr un llunell mae'n debyg. Dwi'n drwgdybus iawn, dwi'n siŵr pa mor sydyn allith y plas Bryn Llawach cael ei werthu. Tra mae o yn dal yn eiddo'r cyngor, ydy'r liability yn mynd i ddod allan o'r cyllideb yr adran addysg, neu ydy o'n mynd yn ganolog i eiddo cyngor Sir Powys? Dwi'n cymryd mae'r ola fi iddo.
Yeah, once we've vacated the property, we'll then transfer the asset to corporate property, and then they'll take on whatever needs to happen to the building.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Angela.
I understand Bryn Llawach used to be a residential school, and
Yeah.
Angela, for some unknown reason, I think it could be something to do with the translation. We're not picking you up there, I don't think. Well, I'm not anyway. Is everybody the same? Is anybody else hearing Angela?
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of trouble with my ear things. Anyway, apologies. Brynllawr, I understand, used to have residential facilities, and there are some residential facilities in Brecon by Penmaes there. And I just wondered, had that ever been explored, and is it something that could help, you know, meet the children's strategy, the closer to home, because we do send children out to council for residential schooling care.
Yeah, well done, Angela. This was something we had quite a conversation about in our pre-meet. Thank you, Angela.
Yes, Angela. Back, you know, at inception of this project, there were discussions with Children's Services at the time, and it was agreed at the time that we wouldn't be progressing with residential here. But then again, you know, we're in a different position now, and maybe the decision may be different if we were having the initial conversations today. So that's how these projects play out today. But we did have those discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Allard, and I'm going to say finally now. I think we've explored most things in this now. So finally, Councillor Allard.
I was just going to follow on from Angela, really. The remaining sites unsold of the new school, will there be room for expansion, such as a accommodation block, or is you know, the footprint of the grounds going to be limited and no opportunity for that sort of development? And one other point, precision is not the right place here, but the MRP policy, James mentioned there was a change in the MRP policy to reflect the lifetime of the asset rather than using averages. So when you're investing in highways, structural repairs, the lifetime was far shorter. And for a long term, whether it's housing or schools, it should reflect the lifetime of the asset rather than the average, which would bring the cost down, for the annual cost down. But correct me if I'm wrong, James. Sorry, two questions there. Apologies, Chair.
Jim, in relation to if needs be, could be any future builds on this or not?
Very difficult question to answer,
Yeah.
Chair. Councillor, at the moment, without knowing exactly what was required, I'm mindful of lengthy conversations before we built Penmaes residential units and the variety of sizes that were positioned at various times there. I think the only thing I could do is say we'd have to look at it on a case-by-case basis when the request came through.
Okay, that's absolutely fine, Jim. And James, just a quick comment on Councillor Allard's comment on the MRP.
Yeah, you're right. I think the effect we give on over the 34 years is the actual effect that would hit the revenue account, whilst the effect for this school would be a longer repayment period with a smaller amount. On some of the other capital schemes, there would be a shorter repayment with a larger amount. So what we're giving here is the actual impact on the council's revenue budget rather than the impact of this actual scheme when it's rolled up with all the other capital schemes. So because there's a slight discrepancy between the two.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of cost shunting between a long-term asset and a short-term asset.
Yeah, and we're just trying to give an accurate what would actually happen to the revenue budget rather than say one thing and then something else happens in the budget papers. So,
okay, I know it's complex. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks all. It's Dr. Richard. You stick your hand up at exactly the right time, and I'm gonna end this agenda item with yourself.
Thanks so much, Chair. I just wanted to provide some assurance really about the transformation programme, just noting the comments around the lack of pace. You know, I think it's fair to say that individual papers get challenged, as they rightly should, through the process of going to CLT and Cabinet and then to yourselves as a scrutiny committee. But I think when I step back and just look at the transformation programme as a whole, you know, wave 1 has been completed. Wave 2 of the transformation programme has been completed, bar the Prestine review and the Ysgol Calan Cymru papers coming forward. And we are looking to bring wave 3 earlier than 2027. So I wouldn't want to leave the impression that we're not absolutely committed to the pace of change, which we need to demonstrate in order that the structure of schools across our authority is right, so that our schools can have the highest standards for our learners. So I did appreciate comments relating to pace around individual papers, but I think when we look at the arc of the transformation programme, you know, we're actually accelerating it and looking to bring it forward. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. I only asked the question really because it's one of the questions that Justin are going to be asking when they come into the authority in early February, really. But yeah, thank you for that assurance. Really, I'm grateful for that. Members, I think we've explored this agenda item now. There's some points which it's challenged officers for a little bit of clarification, but I think it's a pretty straightforward view from ourselves, and that case is there, and we're excited about it, and I don't think there's little more to be said on it, really, is there? Is there anything that we have a burning desire to send across as a recommendation or a comment? No, nobody's spoken up. Marianne and your team, we really congratulate you, Councillor Pete. We congratulate you on this development because it's much needed. Yeah, we can stand all day and say it's needed to come for a long time, but yeah, it's really, really positive, and it's really positive for the learners within Paris as well. So well done to everybody involved. Okay, we move on to agenda item 6. We've been at it an hour and a quarter. Do members want a quick comfort break, or are they happy to continue? Okay, judging on your silence, I'm going to move on to item 6 on your agenda, and it's the work which some of us have been taking part in the Trochi working group. It's been led on by Councillor Bryn. I think we've got a conclusion paper here which is accepted by the members on the working group, but also, well, I shouldn't say and also officers, but I think there's a common theme here that we've all come to the recommendations together. It's a document which we've all had sight of. Councillor Bryn, I will come to you now to take us. I think we need just to consider the recommendations really, rather than go through all the workings which we've done. Councillor Bryn, I'm going to give it to your hands, and then I'll open it up to questions, and hopefully we can ratify this document so that it can be submitted to for cabinet consideration. Councillor Bryn.
Iawn, diolch yn iawn. Dwi'n meddwl bod yna consensus ar y gwaith yma, a dwi'n ddiolchgar iawn i pawb sydd bod yn cymryd rhan ynddo fo. 4 prif argymhelliad sydd. Wel, da ni ddechrau ffwr yn diffinio'r gwahanol mathau o drochi, sef trochi cynnar sy'n digwydd mewn pob ysgol gynradd cyfrwng Cymraeg dwyieithog yn normal. Trochi hwyr i blant sy'n cyrraedd ac yn dewis ceisio symud i'r ffrwd Gymraeg yn ystod yr oedran cynradd yn unig yn reality unrhyw oed cynradd. A trochi pontio sydd ddim ar hyn o bryd yn bodoli yn yr ysgolion, sef trosglwyddo o blwyddyn 6 i blwyddyn 7 ac newid cyfrwng yr amser hynny. Tri argymhelliad, un ydy bod y trochi hwyr yn cael ei gefnogi'n gyson, a bod yr arian bod o'n digwydd yn gyson rownd y flwyddyn, bod o ddim yn dibynnol ar grantiau gan cyngor, gan y Llywodraeth Cymru, a bod y darpariaeth ar gael ar draws y sir. Yr un fath efo'r trochi pontio wedyn, bod ni angen datblygu ysgolion sy'n mynd â trochi pontio ymlaen, a bod yr ariannu yn gyson, ddim yn dibynnol ar grantiau gan Llywodraeth Cymru, a mae'n debyg bod yr arian hwnnw yn cael ei reoli yn ganolog gan yr adran addysg. Y trydydd argymelliad ydy bod yna hyrwyddo yn digwydd yn gyson pob blwyddyn ac yn cael ei ariannu'n iawn fel bod pawb yn ymwybodol o'r cyfleoedd i wneud hynny. A'r pedwerydd argymelliad ydy bod yna cynllun 5 i 10 mlynedd yn dangos sut mae trochi yn datblygu ar y cyd gyda cysga Powys. So, gobeithio bod chi wedi cael golwg ar y geiriad yn mwy fanwl na dwi wedi rhoi i chi fanna, ond ydy hwnna'n ddigon o cyflwyniad am rwan, Cadeirydd?
Thank you, Bryn, and diolch, Bryn, to the work you put in surrounding this. And yeah, it's been an interesting working. I was on the working group, and it was an interesting working group to be a part of. And the one thing it struck me, I've always been supportive of the Trochi initiative, but the one thing it struck me was there's an opportunity to make a real difference. And even though I was supportive of it before, I'm even more supportive of it now, really. So yeah, it's useful, and I think there's a set of recommendations which can make a difference, all revolving around funding, etc., etc., etc. But it starts rolling that ball down the hill. Anwen. Anwen, you're muted.
Ie, diolch o galon, a diolch o galon i chi cynghorydd Bryn am y gefnogaeth. Mi ai o Saesneg, does nid yn haws i bawb clywed yn syth. Ond I just wanted to reiterate our thanks as officers, but also want to express that we have shown our commitment to increasing the number of learners becoming bilingual across Powys, in that we have included the numbers within our education service IEP, our education service plan, but also it will be a measure and a target within the corporate the strategic plan for 25-26 as well. So I just wanted to reiterate our full commitment to this. So diolch o galon i chi gyd.
Thank you, Anwen. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, as part of our pre-meeting yesterday, we did suggest that perhaps this issue around funding and whether the schools should contribute some from the delegated budget should be referred to the Fair Funding Formula working group in readiness for the 26-27 financial year.
Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Gareth has said there. It is essential that the schools demonstrate commitment to Welsh medium education, and that there's a strong, very strong tendency to assume that all the money that arrives is delegated to the schools is for English medium education. That's not the case. Should never have been the case. And they need to demonstrate the commitment, and perhaps the central funding that can provide to make it go forward would be on some kind of match funding basis to make sure that the education money is spent on bilingual Welsh medium education, not just on English medium education, which has been the inclination of some in the secondary school in particular.
Bryn, do you feel that's captured in the document?
I'd like in paragraph 2, it says this should come from the central reserve base, ensuring the schools wishing to offer Trochi Pont to agree to do so according to the council's terms and conditions. I'd like an additional sentence that this central funding is additional, that the money that is spent in we cannot have the schools just assuming that all the money they're going to get is that it's that you can't just have grant funding and they will treat the central pot of money as a grant, which they won't develop. They need to commit some of their own money to the project. That's what I feel.
Okay, Nancy's got her hand up, and I'm sure she's going to add to this.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come in on a couple of points there. So just for members to be aware, I know some of you will be aware already, but we've got a funding formula review group that we've got one this afternoon actually that is going to consider any changes, and we're working towards April 26 in terms of those changes and any proposals that come forward. That obviously then involves full consultation with all schools, not just the ones affected, but every school in the authority and their governing body we'd need to consult with around any changes to the funding formula. So component 4 is for national and local authority priorities within the funding formula, and we've got the special schools access in that in terms of that component 4 at the moment. But I just wanted to say, obviously, then we talk about funding, and we'll obviously need to consider if we are wanting schools to contribute, we need to be really clear and explicit with them, consult with them, and look at the basis that we would have that arrangement in place with them, and discuss that openly as part of the schools funding formula review group, and ultimately the schools budget forum would need to review that and be consulted on it. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch on really is that you've got, there's various ways of approaching movement around the funding formula. You've got at the moment the current pot as it stands, and whether you alter amendments in that funding formula if you wanted to see additional costs, additional funding put into TROCI provision, and that's one element of it. Or you look at, as I know Councillor Bryn touched on, any increase to the delegated base budget would need to form part of a business case and ultimately be part of the council's finance resource model that the service would need to put forward as part of that, really, and that robust timeline and process that's in place. The other thing, if I can, just to touch on as well, is that just want to be really clear that the funding formula provides the same funding for both an English stream and a Welsh stream in terms of the components. So if you're a dual stream school, you are treated as a separate school for both funding purposes. There is a very minor element in the formula for Welsh medium and dual stream schools of around £3,000 to £5,000 that they get on top of an English medium school would get for translation purposes. So it's very, very small. There is a small recognition of that in the funding formula. But other than that, all schools start with the same per pupil funding. And then we move into the complexities of the different schools we have, dual stream, smaller schools, and that's where there's extra protection built in based on those schools that drives their relative need to spend. So I just wanted to just conclude on that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Gareth, you raised this issue, and Bryn, you echoed it. Do you think we need to do further in relation to this paper in view of Nancy's comments, really?
No, I think if Nancy's aware of it, then she just takes it forward as an action for this afternoon's meeting.
Good. Bryn, content?
Yes, if there's awareness and commitment, that's fine. I mean, the sentences that follow, it must ensure that every participating school arranges appropriate support in year 7 and 8, as well as full Welsh medium continuity in years 9, 10, and 11. So long as the schools can achieve that, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say a huge thank you to the Scrutiny subgroup that put this paper together. I started reading it with a little bit of trepidation, and I finished reading it with a huge amount of relief, because everything you've identified there echoes and supports the messages that I have been saying and have got backing from other cabinet portfolio holders when we've been talking to the Minister. You've identified the problem of giving support and immersion in rural areas. If you look at our centres, well, the centre in the north that we've got, if that were in Cardiff, Swansea or Merthyr, that would cover the entirety of the authority's area within 5 miles. And you've rightly identified that we need to provide greater levels of provision. I hope when we move forward with the organisational changes in respect to Welsh medium at primary and secondary level, across the county, we will have 3 localities at which we can look at immersion centres. But we are going to need help from Welsh Government. If it is genuinely a priority of Welsh Government that they want to reach the 2050 target, well, this is an area where they can make significant contributions to making it happen. Not just here, but in other rural counties where the levels of Welsh speaking in the community is much lower, and the distances between schools and distances between potential points of immersion support are significantly greater. So thank you. I hope you bring this to Cabinet relatively soon, and it is something that I will be asking officers to bring to the attention of their equivalents within Welsh Government Education Department, as a piece of work that highlights the challenge of trying to deliver Welsh Government's targets for 2050 in a diverse and extensive rural area. So thank you. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Pete, for that endorsement. For some unknown reason, my laptop won't let me load the document now, but Bryn, I know we spoke about it during. Is there reference to the delivering of trochi virtually in the document?
Not specifically trochi. There is reference to the continued the full Welsh medium continuity in years 9, 10 and 11 can be possibly provided with collaboration with other schools. So in that sense, there could be some
okay. Okay. Members,
contribution.
Happy? Are we happy to continue? I think it is. I think it's an important document, and I think it's been a really useful working group, really. And sometimes we as councillors feel we don't make a difference, but I think this is a document which will help officers, will help the development of the Welsh language throughout our authority. So congratulate everybody. I'm going to suggest, and members, please, when this goes to Cabinet, I'm going to suggest that Bryn leads on the paper, because I certainly think that he'll be more placed to make comment in Cabinet and myself. Would members be happy with that? Yeah, Bryn, would you be happy?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, members, should we move on? Yeah. Good. That takes us to item 7 on our agenda. Happy to continue or happy to have a break? Happy to continue. That's what I like to hear. It's the School Standards and Improvement Report. It's for noting, but obviously open to comments and questions. And Dr. Richards, you popped up really, so are you going to make a comment first? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Gwynfor. Obviously, I'm here. Anwyn Orrells, Head of School Improvement and Learning, is here, and relevant officers to speak about the different sections of the report. Like with the Bryn Llawch paper, we do have a short presentation, if you wouldn't mind us sharing that. That presentation will serve to just highlight some of the absolute key areas of the report, which we want to make sure that we properly share and, of course, scrutinised on. So do you mind if we pop
Yeah,
up
no,
the
that's absolutely
presentation?
fine. Anwyn's got her hand up also, so should we take Anwyn's comments before we go to the report, or Anwyn, are you delivering the... No, Anwyn's hand's gone now. Dr. Richard,
so Anwyn will share the report. I'll introduce and then hand over to Anwyn.
Okay then, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Richard, I won't share until you and I are finished, if that's okay, and then...
There we are. Fantastic. Okay, yeah, thanks so much. This is, a very important report into school improvement and standards. Just to give you the arc of the report, the first section shares local and national data, so you'll get a sense of Powys benchmarked against the rest of Wales. We then go on to explore the outcomes of Estyn inspections and, crucially, the key recommendations from those inspections. And then the final section of the report looks at future qualifications. So the Scrutiny Committee is well cited on how qualifications are changing in our schools. As I said, officers will take you through the detail of the report, but I do want to note some of the key functions of this report and the key role that data plays. Firstly, what this report provides is another piece of evidence that supports the evaluation of the work that we're doing in our schools around standards. And that the evaluation that you see in front of you also provides a benchmark against the rest of Wales. It is worth noting that some of the data you see in the report is one part of the suite of evidence that we use to evaluate our schools and then to support and challenge. Like I said, what this report articulates is how we work to identify where standards are not where they should be in our schools. We've got the highest aspirations for learners in Powys, and challenge and support and a thorough understanding of the data leads to a thorough understanding of areas of need and weakness, which we can then tackle. And then thirdly, importantly, this is data that holds us to account. It's data that publicly holds us to account as a council, as an education service within the whole council, and then in turn, it's how we hold our schools to account, of course, in the right culture of support and challenge. So this paper is not a one-off event. It's a report that we will bring termly with the latest available data. So this level of scrutiny is a continuous one as we progress through the academic year. Diolch yn fawr. I'll hand over to Anwen.
Diolch, Richard. So I just want to reiterate exactly what Richard said there about the importance of us analysing our data and informing our improvement planning. So that's an ongoing process we undertake. And hopefully when you see our IBP that you'll see that reflected. But also just to confirm, what happens annually is that data is released, and you may feel that it's very late, it's now January, but it's only now this week and then further at the very end of January when we actually receive confirmed national data. So it isn't that we've sat on this data, we've waited until national data is released in the public domain. And with your permission, Chair, as Richard has just reiterated, we would feel that probably a termly standards and improvement paper would be beneficial for us to share with you, so that as a scrutiny committee that you have an ongoing overview of where we are as a service. So that's a request if we can put it in your schedule.
I think that's one of the concerns which we as a scrutiny committee have had for some time. So I think that would certainly help us and be a suitable solution to things which we've been raising concerns about, really. So yes, without anybody telling you any different or speaking up now, yeah, we'd be more than content with that, please. Committee happy with that? Yeah, the silence is all good.
Lovely, diolch. Can I just confirm, Chair, that you are seeing my...
Yeah, no, that's up with us.
Sorry?
Yeah, no, that's with us.
Yeah, lovely, excellent, because I lose you when I go. So, okay, so a quick overview therefore, so as in line with the paper. So I'll bring in Cressy Murphy first, who is the Service Manager for Secondary and All-Age Schools. Cressy?
Diolch, Anwen. Okay, so just going to go through some of the data that you will have seen in the report. This table that you can see in front of you gives the percentages of the grades that have been achieved in Powys. You'll note that there has been a drop-off between 2022 to 23 and 2023 to 24. That was expected, and you can see that that's a national picture, and that is due to the fact that WJEC have returned to post-pandemic arrangements. So there were no additional materials for teaching, and the grade boundaries had returned to previous levels. So that is, as you can see, a national picture. However, you will see that for a starter C, Powys actually have exceeded the 2022 to 23 levels. So that's actually a positive there. We are above the Welsh average at A starter C and A starter G. However, I will say that, that's expected. We are a county with lower levels of deprivation and lower levels of pupils that are eligible for free school meals. And whilst it is positive that we're above the Welsh average, we think that there is room for improvement there, that we can do better than that. And that is going to be a key focus for us working with schools moving forward. We can see that we're below the national average for A-star A, and historically outcomes for more able learners has been an area for improvement in Powys. Whilst we are still below the national average, you will note that we are improving, we are decreasing the gap between Powys and Wales. In 2019, we were 1.9 percentage points behind the Wales average, and we're now 0.7. So it is positive that we're seeing a few improvements there, but there's still a lot of work to be done in that area. If we could go to the next slide, please, Anwen. Thank you. Okay, so in this table, we can see here that we've got a number of key positives. We are above the Welsh average in all of these measures. However, I will mitigate that again by saying that we would expect to be above the national average. If you note in the report, you will see as well that the Welsh Government have released the data for all of the 22 counties across Wales. And we are actually performing as the top county in the Skills Challenge Certificate Indicator, which is incredibly positive. We're also third out of 22 authorities for CAPT 9 and for the Science Indicator. However, whilst we were in 5th and 7th place for numeracy and literacy respectively, it's only slightly above the national average. And as we've noted before, we feel that we've got a need for improvement in those areas. So literacy and numeracy indicators are a key priority area for us. And that correlates with the number of schools that we see in Powys with ESTIN recommendations to improve the progressive development of pupils' skills across schools. Okay. Diolch, Anwen. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, so we come to Key Stage 5 data, and you will see that we are below the Welsh average in all of these measures. So we do have significant concerns about Key Stage 5 data, and this really does highlight the fact that the current model for Key Stage 5 isn't working for our learners. Okay, that's everything from me on.
Yeah, lovely, diolch. And we'll have an opportunity, members, for you to ask all of us questions after. So moving on in the paper to the next section around ESTIN inspection outcomes. As you see in the paper, we shared outcomes for last full academic year, and that's one of the reasons, Chair, why I feel a termly report would be better rather than coming with a whole update for a whole year for you. So I'm going to cover the full academic year first for last academic year, and then the second section up until December, which will give you an idea of what you can expect in the future. So last academic year, we returned to post-pandemic arrangements, etc. And we had 20 schools and settings across Powys inspected. So of those 20, 10, which is really positive, had no follow-up. Those 10 were primary schools and one special school. But we'll note that last academic year, we had 4 primary schools go into what was then known as ESTIN review, which isn't actually a formal category. It was ESTINs of saying, we're not sure about this school, about standards. We'll return to you within a year and expect to see improvements. So we had 4 primary schools go into ESTIN review, followed by 2 secondaries and 2 all-age schools. And last year as well, we had the pupil referral unit go into a formal category of significant improvement. Of note, none of our schools last year went in special measures. Last academic year went into special measures. And last year, during the year, following on from previous years and previous inspections, We did, and we were pleased to see that Forden in December 23 came out of Estyn Review. So that you understand, for an Estyn Review, it's a desktop exercise in the first instance where Estyn speak to the head teacher and speak to officers within the local authority to decide whether there is sufficient evidence that the school have made the progress required. So last year, Forden Primary School came out of Estyn Review, as did Special School Ysgol Robert Owen, which is very positive. Also last year, we had 2 schools in special measures, which was Brecon and Gwernafed. Now, in their monitoring visit in June, it was judged that Brecon still required improvement, so remains in special measures. But I must note that Estyn, as of late and last summer, have stated in their reports to us that they are seeing the early signs of progress and are pleased with the progress being made. And then of significant importance to us as a local authority was Gwernafed in July, following a full monitoring visit by Estyn being removed from special measures, as Estyn identified that they had made the progress required. So that was a good way to end that Gwernafed came out of special measures. So that's where we were last academic year. And to give you a quick overview, which is significant for us to, in our support and challenge to schools, is a quick overview of the areas where they identified improvements required. So you'll note from the numbers of recommendations that most of the recommendations were based around quality of teaching and learning experiences. And then the second area of priority was the ones around leadership. And around leadership, it was very much focused about leaders accurately evaluating the strengths and areas for development of the school and accurately reflecting on the impact of their work on the progress of learners and in teaching. So those have informed our support, which Cressy will come back to in a few minutes around where we're going with supporting and challenging our schools. And then this academic year, so what we've done here is reported on the reports and the inspections from September to December 2024. And this includes what was in the public domain as of the 31st of January. Not January, sorry, 31st of December. So from September to December, we had 4 reports published. Following I need to go back a step, sorry. In September 2024, we need to advise Scrutiny Committee that Estyn changed their inspection arrangements. So rather than having, as in the past, 5 inspection areas, from September 2024, they've gone into 3 inspection areas based around teaching and learning. So they're talking about the provision and the outcomes together. Second one around wellbeing, care, support and guidance. And the third around leading and improving. So now there are only 3 inspection areas. But of importance for you all as well, the system has changed significantly as well. Every school within a 6-year cycle will now receive 2 Estyn visits. One will be a core visit, which we've reported on here, but also they have what we call interim visits now, and they are a 1-day visit with 2 or perhaps 3 inspectors visiting the school to check up on how they're progressing against their SDP and against previous Estyn inspections. So this last autumn term, I haven't reported in a table here, but we were really pleased that 6 of our schools did well in their interim visits. All it is a very simple letter that goes into the public domain, reporting on their progress. 4 of those 6 they reported had made strong progress, and the other 2 had made satisfactory progress, so that there was no significant concerns from the interim visits. And then what we had was 4 primary schools being inspected as a core visit. So for primaries, it's a 3-day inspection. For secondaries, it goes over 4 days. And of the 4 inspections, we had 2 with no follow-up, and indeed they identified strengths in those 2 schools, which was Ysgol Pennant and Ysgol Ysgol Calon y Dderwen, and they identified spotlights around use of digital skills and their Welsh medium provision, which is a real credit. But unfortunately, we did have, of the other 2 primary schools, we had 1 go into significant improvement, which was Archdeacon Griffiths, and 1 into special measures, which was Llangors. Now, this is not an excuse. It's not what we want, but you'll all be aware of the significant leadership concerns that Llangors had experienced last year. So it was expected that Llangors would go into special measures due to the leadership issues that we'd had at the school. And then in the last term as well, we have seen Ysgol Calon Cymru, that was previously in Estyn Review, receive a monitoring visit. They came back following a desktop exercise because many of the recommendations around teaching and learning, Estyn wanted to come back and physically see it for themselves. So unfortunately, Ysgol Calon Cymru was moved from Estyn Review to significant improvement in September 2024, so putting Ysgol Calon Cymru into a formal category. But then on the flip side, just before Christmas, Radnor Valley Primary School, we're really pleased to say that they were removed from Estyn Review. And then where are the recommendations sitting at the moment? Many of the recommendations, again, follows the same pattern as previously, are around teaching and learning and around leadership. But I'm sure when I take this presentation down in a few minutes that you will have questions to share or ask us there. Okay, back to Cressy one around the support, because obviously, given where we are over our outcomes and our Estyn, you will all appreciate the importance of significant support, but also challenge to our schools.
Diolch, Anwen. So in terms of the support that are being provided to those schools, we have an established and experienced team of primary school advisors, and they will be supporting those schools that need the most improvement on a more intense basis than they would to any other school. In terms of the secondary and all-age school improvement advisor team, we had struggled with some recruitment last year, and we have, for this academic year, been able to recruit a new school improvement advisor team for the secondary schools with some really experienced people so we've got 1 person who's an extremely experienced school improvement advisor, 2 who have recently left headship and been successful head teachers, and they are really well placed to be able to provide support to those schools. As you know, we also have that established team of subject improvement advisors to support improvements in outcomes in certain areas and in skills. We work closely with the Mid Wales Partnership to improve that collaboration between schools and raise standards. And we have a number of professional learning programmes in place, some that are run by Powys and some that are through Mid Wales Partnership. And then there's national ones as well. And we support schools to be able to access the right professional learning to support them to address those key areas of need, and in particular around improving leadership, teaching and learning and skills. Diolch.
Merci. And I think to add there, any school in a formal category or the previous ones in Estin Review are significantly challenged as well, Cressy, and I will sure we'll pick that up in your questioning. So there's a significant
Absolutely.
challenge there as well as the support. Diolch. And then, Chair, just quickly, Chris James, who is our 14 plus lead, is going to give you a quick overview of the new GCSE qualifications, which is really, really important to us because for our secondary schools and all age schools, above and beyond the Estin, the normal challenges of the curriculum for Wales delivery and everything else, we do have a new range of challenges in the form of the new qualifications from September 2025 onwards. Chris is going to take you through this quickly, but I'm sure if members feel they would like further detail, we could cover this up in another session with you as well, if you feel you want more detail later. So diolch I ti, Chris. Thank you.
Diolch, Amen. But everybody, thanks for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you about the new quals. So as Anwen mentioned, what and how the young people in Wales has changed with the major overhaul with the curriculum for Wales coming into play. And we're now at the phase where those learners who started on this journey are now entering into the qualification end of their education. And again, the curriculum for Wales, the ambition was there is providing schools with autonomy to deliver a broad and balanced programme of study. So subsequently, Qualifications Wales have reviewed the qualifications available in Wales to reflect this. Their decisions on the range of the new quals have been guided by three principles. So number one, that they align to the curriculum for Wales. Two, they're coherent and inclusive. And three, that they are available in Cymraeg and English. The new quals they've put forward, the suite they've put forward is ambition to be, is comprehensive, inclusive, spanning from entry level up to level 2. And they include, so we have reformed GCSEs, a new range of quals called VCSEs, vocational qualifications, foundation qualifications, and then a skills suite. So these are going to be, that's the menu of courses which will be fully available to learners from September 27. Centres will be able to provide a bespoke combination of these qualifications to help support learners achieve their goals. The Welsh Government has published additional 14 to 16 learner guidance to help centres design their curriculum, and there's some challenges attached to this I'll touch on briefly in a moment. But they've released this guidance to help centres meet the new learner entitlement, which outlines the curriculum that all learners in year 10 and 11 will be entitled to. This means that centres should organise their curriculum time and resources around these four components you have on your screen at the moment. So that they aren't mutually exclusive and they are interrelated, but a lot of the work at the moment is going into understanding this and what the implications this has on timetabling and staffing and so on, which I'll go on to a bit later. Go to the next slide, please, Amran. Okay, there we go. Thanks. So in terms of GCSE, so this is the first wave, what they're calling wave 1 qualifications. So these are the new GCSEs from level 1 and 2. They support the 6 areas of learning, and expressive arts, health, well-being, humanities, languages, maths and numeracy, and science and tech. The subjects, as well as the topics and everything contained within them, has been shaped through collaboration with stakeholders and experts. But again, it comes back to those main principles that they're available in Cymraeg and English. There's a big change in the range of assessment methods available in these qualifications, and that's posing a particular headache to schools at the moment in terms of the number of digital assessments they're going to be taking. There's a huge increase in what we call non-examined assessments, so NEAs, like courseworks, oral assessments, and so on. So schools are trying to figure that out at the moment. They make them the best use of digital tech, and they reflect diversity. The reformed GCSEs are going to be introduced in 2 waves. So this is our first wave from September 25, and then in September 26 will be the second wave, which I'll go, which will come up in a moment. when the new GCSEs are introduced, they will replace the pre-existing GCSEs. Next slide, please, Anwen.
Which one are you seeing, just to double check?
It should now be the VCS wave 2. Yeah, perfect. Oh, sorry. They're the wave 1 and 2 of the GCSEs. Can we go on to the next slide, please? Perfect, thank you. So the Qualifications Wales are introducing Vocational Certificate of Secondary Education, VCSE, to the national 14 to 16 suite of quals. So VCSEs are going to be available in a range of work-related subjects, enabling young people to learn about occupational areas through more practical approaches to learning and assessment. They span from level 1 to 2, which mirrors the GCSEs, and I think that was a big aim of this work, is to try and bring the vocational pathway in line with the academic pathway, and acknowledging that learners aren't one or the other. A lot of the time that these pathways are equitable and indeed essential for our economy moving forward, that learners are taking these pathways. So within that wave 3, you'll see the VCSEs. You'll also see the new foundation qualifications which are coming, and they foundation quals are for learners who may not feel ready for GCSEs or VCSEs. These quals span entry level up to level 1, with the exception of the Cymraeg quals. And then there's a suite of 9 general subjects within the foundation quals, which make up as well as the 15 work-related subjects, and these directly support progression onto the new VCSEs. Learners can take a mix of general and work-related, and they can also take these qualifications alongside GCSE. So there's no, this doesn't restrict them from having, flexibility over picking courses which are the most suitable for them. There's a huge amount of challenge within this. Schools are looking at their staffing and their expertise, what they have available in-house. Of course, we'd all love to say, looking at these qualifications, that all of these quals will be will make up, will be available to all learners in all settings, which is just not feasible at this point. And schools are going to have to look at what is the best way of meeting the learner entitlement, while still also balancing a budget and operating. So the staffing and expertise is huge, the timetabling of that. And as I previously mentioned, the assessment requirements, that they're changing the performance measures of how we're going to be measuring schools. That's currently literally just opened up for consultation. Welsh Gov are consulting on that. And as always, there's teething issues of new qualifications when they come in. So to support schools on this journey they're on at the moment, senior leaders with the responsibility for curriculum design and examination officers, they've all and head teachers, they've all received sessions on the 14 to 16 learner entitlement. We've established networks to provide that strategic bespoke support to schools on whatever areas they're particularly looking at. And this is in the shape of timetabling mainly at the moment with those curriculum leaders. And then at a middle tier level, our subject officers are supporting the subject leaders in each of the schools through network meetings, where they're looking at the new specifications in detail, the sample assessments and the teacher guidance. And then finally, the additional support available for schools is that the WJC are running across the entire of Wales insets. So ours is on Friday the 21st of March. All qualifications in wave 1 are being provided with a full day with WJC subject advisors to look at the new quals for September, in addition to the senior leaders also having a day focused on the strategic elements of delivering the new quals. Diolch, Anwen.
Diolch o galon, Chris. And can I just add as well, you can see it's a very complex journey we will be on with qualifications from September 25 to September 27 onwards. And therefore, just to reiterate, we are working, as Chris has said, very, very closely with our school leaders and curriculum leads, looking at our timetabling, and following on from what Nancy said, our formula review this afternoon. this will have to feature within our review of the formula, because the demands on Key Stage 4, so year 10 and 11 subjects is significant, and we must make sure that our power schools are able to deliver that breadth of GCSEs and VCSEs in the future. So that will feature as part of the conversations this afternoon in the formula review. So diolch Cadeirydd, thank you Chair for allowing us just to give you a quick overview. We're open to questions or comments. Diolch o galon.
Yeah, Conwyn and team. Yeah, you say it's a quick overview, but it is quite comprehensive, really, and probably the information that we require. Members, open for questions. Councillor Aled pop first, and then Margaret afterwards. Councillor Aled.
It's a bit of a fundamental question, really. Why are we letting our children down? The standards in the school have been slipping, and I'm, this is the first time we've seen this sort of data for a long time, and especially in secondary schools, we're clearly letting our children down. The outcomes for our learners are deteriorating. A number of schools in special measure, some sort of testing category is quite frightening.
Can I come back in there?
Yeah,
Councillor Aled, thank you for that question. It is one that we absolutely are asking ourselves, and it isn't that we want to let them down. And I don't think there would be a single teacher across Powys that would want to let our children down, but it has become perhaps an element that we need to focus on that level of challenge, that we're not in here in the north or in the south, that Mwyndau Maldwyn, that easy, that we must identify the potential our learners have and push them to the fullest. And actually going back to where Chris has just covered around the subjects, and make sure that we allow our schools to offer that breadth, because I think sometimes just doing straight GCSEs is probably not the right answer for all our learners. Many of our learners need that mix of academic and vocational, and I think that's a really, really important area, that we give them that breadth of choice. But of course, I'm going to put it within our funding envelope, and that's the balancing. But we are recognising very much and supporting and challenging not only our senior leaders, but also our middle leaders. And what we're seeing very importantly is, because many of our middle leaders are one-man bands in many of our schools, that ability to work together, and that's the importance of the secondary support team, to bring them together to support, so that when they're individuals working, that they've got people to bounce back and forth with, support and challenge. So Councillor Aled, I just want to reiterate that we absolutely will not rest until our standards are where we expect them. As Cressy raised, we could look at them and say our main performance measures are above Wales, but of course we are very, very lucky here in Powys that we are very, well, not very affluent, but an affluent county compared to others. So our outcomes should be naturally higher than Wales. So it is an area that we are focusing on.
Yeah, we do need to compare ourselves to the equivalents, and it's really important in doing that. And I not for a moment do I doubt your commitment, Anwen, or Richard's commitment, but there's something fundamentally going wrong within our schools. And I'm not questioning the teachers and the head teachers' commitment, but when Essing comes back, highlighting teaching and learning and leadership, there is something fundamental wrong within this, and maybe it's possibly coming back to the funding and asking our schools to do too much. And when we have comments in the presentation like the schools will try and figure it out when we're talking about the new qualifications, that's in a way it's not really acceptable, and it's becoming more of a lottery as you go forward. It depends what staff's in school, that's what subjects will be offered within that school, and the Welsh Government moving the goalposts. It's difficult to hit a moving target, and I'm wondering whether that is part of the motives of the Welsh Government, because will these new qualifications lead to better outcomes and better life chances for our children when they leave the schools in the future? I'm not convinced.
I can't answer that last question, sorry, Councillor Aled, because I don't know, but we will. But I want to reiterate what Chris said. It won't be left to chance for our schools. We are working with our leaders on curriculum planning, but also our subject teams are working with the subject teachers as well on making sure that they're well supported. And you ask why? I do strongly believe that probably the capacity of our schools is really important, and the importance of working across our counties and making sure that all our staff, our leaders and middle leaders do get the opportunity to work with other schools, not only in Powys, but also using more and more our Mid Wales partnership links and also with schools across across Wales. And I think one important element, and it is only early stages of this, is Andrew Williams did the funding deep dives with us, but that has forged significant, strong relationships with Ysgol Radyw down in Cardiff, or just outside Cardiff, of course, in Radyw. And that many of our schools now have gone down into Cardiff to see how they've improved teaching and learning, but also their teaching and learning lead has been up to speak to our middle leaders and senior leaders around how they have driven improvements in teaching and learning in their school. So it is still early days, but I just want to reassure you, Councillor Aled, that we are looking at every option available and supporting our senior, middle leaders and our teachers through different networks. And that's why we feel quite strongly, and I'm very pleased that the chair is happy for this, that we come on a termly basis to give you updates about where we are, because I think it's an area that as a scrutiny committee, learning and skills, that we need to keep you updated and that you can ask the questions of our provision.
Okay,
Margaret.
Yeah, thank you. You've updated us on so many things that are going to be happening and changes. And the statistics we've seen, and that termly idea, I think, is an extremely good one. But I suppose I always wear a primary hat, and I know how important the data and the statistics are at the end of the secondary phase of education. But how are we as a scrutiny going to be able to see statistics for much earlier? Our children come into school when they're 4. And that stage is vital. If we don't get that right, you have started almost a child on a downward path. And so I want to know what will be planned for scrutiny to see that progression from and standards from that level onwards. We're focusing solely at the moment on at the end of secondary and exam results, which is right. But you are not going to get children engaging with education in the right way unless you get that early first introduction to education and that very early primary level monitored and improved or ensured that the children are having the best possible experience at that level, their first introduction to education. And I feel that the focus we've lost focus on that vital stage.
Thank you, Margaret, for that. And can I say probably this one was because it was very much reporting on outcomes.
Yes,
I understand your concern, yes. But if I can reiterate that of importance today, yes, these are the only quantitative data we have, but for lower down the continuum, we are very, very dependent on qualitative, as in our outcomes, perhaps from Estin inspections in early years as well, we could share with you next time, because the early years profile and the settings profiles are very positive. So perhaps we should share them and where their recommendations are. But if it would help, I think one of our key priorities is that continuum of progression. So if we could report on how that is looking following our support visits in the summer, then we could give you an overview of what the reports are saying across our primaries and secondaries.
Yes, that would be helpful, because you hear that children aren't coming into school with some of the skills that they previously, etc. And so it's all that sort of area. I think from a scrutiny point of view, we need to sort of look at it following from that stage onwards.
Diolch, yes. So the only sort of actual physical data we'll have is estimate outcomes earlier. But we can share what we've learned from our visits with you in our termly reports. Next one could be around the summary of the primary visits and the early years. So diolch galon. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Margaret. Councillor Bryn.
Yeah, diolch yn iawn. It's probably a bit beyond Powys, really, but well, how are you going to sustain the enthusiasm of secondary teachers with such a suite of general GCSEs or VCSEs, none of which existed as a qualification which the teachers, the current staff you have, are actually qualified in. It's almost like a case of having to retrain staff for all these new subjects, and I cannot see where you can generate the enthusiasm amongst the staff for that progress. You know, I know primary school teachers see secondary schools as needing to change and become more like them in many respects, but as kids get older, they appreciate a bit of speciality, a bit of in-depth, bit of depth of knowledge, and it just strikes me as a real, because we can't get people with physics degrees to teach physics or chemistry degrees to teach chemistry. We kind of it feels as if you're giving up trying to teach physics and chemistry, and you just get some general GCSE. And I don't know how you build in enthusiasm for that kind of educational approach.
Diolch, Cynghorydd Bryn. I wish I had a magic wand. And I know Richard wants to come in, so I'll just go quickly. I wish I had a magic wand, but all I can do, come back to reiterate, as Chris mentioned in his element, we are supporting as much as we possibly can with our secondary team, the support for the individual subjects, the support from a WJC for our leaders, and also then our support for curriculum leads. Cynghorydd Bryn, we are doing everything we possibly can to make sure that we do recruit, and we do go out several times, as you know, for adverts. So yes, we do our best to make teaching, because it's such a rewarding job, but it isn't easy, as we all know. We are doing our best to keep the momentum and keep our workforce in Powys as happy and as energized as we possibly can. One thing we do find in Powys is once they arrive in Powys, they don't tend to leave. So it's getting them to Powys is our biggest challenge. But once we get them here, they don't look back. So that's the most important, attracting them to Powys in the first place. So I don't know, Richard, do you want to come back in? And then is that okay, Chair? And then
Dr. Richard said his hand up for some time now, sorry. Go on, Dr. Richard.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Chair. Yeah, just on Councillor Bryn's point, I won't add much more than what Anwyn said around that, but also just to note that we've also got representation at a national level on workforce planning working groups, which are looking at not just the recruitment, but also the retention, and not just of school leaders and teachers, but also all of those valuable staff in our schools as well. So I'll leave that point there. I did just want to come back to Councillor Alid's point. You know, it's a really blunt question, isn't it? And it is it's the question we need to be asking, you know, why are we letting learners down in our schools? And, you know, what we've got is variable standards and a lack of consistency across our schools. You know, I feel confident that as an authority, we've set a vision. You know, there'd be lots of people in this room who were involved in the setting of that vision back in 2019, 2020. We've now got a very strong strategy to support us to realise that vision. And the work that we're doing is to relentlessly focus on the impact of what we do, to make sure that we're not doing the nice to-dos, but we're doing the things that are absolutely going to impact on learner progression in our schools. I think what's absolutely key for me is how well, as an education service, we actually know our schools. Because if we don't know our schools well, we can't provide the right challenge and support. So that process of knowing our schools, it's about what data do we hold on our schools, what's the relationship between our school improvement advisors and our school leaders, how are we as an education authority supporting evaluation and improvement planning in schools, but also challenging. Fundamentally, if we get the evaluation of standards wrong in our schools, the work that we do doesn't target the right areas. So I think Cressy referenced this in her part of the presentation, but I just would like to strengthen the point around the work we're doing to properly understand the strengths and areas for development in our schools. And without that, we won't be able to raise the standards. Diolch, Chair.
Thanks, Dr. Richard. Okay, Gareth, no, who asked that question? Sorry.
Councillor Alid.
Councillor Alid, yeah. Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got sort of 4 areas of questioning, but I'll pick up there from where Richard just said. How well do we know our schools? That is a good question, Dr. Richard. How well do you know your schools? These ESTIN inspections, or whatever they were you expecting the results you've got?
Thanks so much. That is a good question. The answer is that without going through the individual schools, there are a school on there which has caused a level of surprise. But what we're confident of now with the work with our new colleagues and new consistency across our SIA teams is the evaluations that we have on our schools and the areas of strengths and development are accurate. And that's because we're using a greater range of evidence to come to those evaluations, and the right individuals are working with schools.
Okay, so
Can I
possibly
just
the
come in
answer
there,
there.
sorry?
Angela,
Yeah, you
hold
can,
fire,
but it
Anna's
sounds like
coming in.
Just quickly, around the most, apart from one, as Richard said, we had predicted the outcomes accurately and had reported that to ESTIN in advance as well, what we thought that would be. And some we were supporting but hadn't had the impact yet, but others we did know where those schools would be.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair enough then. So my question was, I remember previously in learning skills, we used to get lots of charts and tables and traffic light coloured, every school listed with where its status was it performing well or not well, red, green, blue, all the different colours. And I don't think we've seen anything like that in Scrutiny for an awful long time. So do we not get the information about individual schools, their performance, the ones causing concerns, the ones that are doing well? You know, do we know? And I suppose perhaps we don't need to know, but you should know which of our schools are performing really well, that you can have best practice and share that good practice with other schools, and which are not. And I'm concerned that maybe we don't have that. And I wonder if there's any connection between the demise of ERU. We used to be involved with ERU and do a lot of work with ERU, and the new system, which I can't even remember what it is, but working with Ceredigion. And can you give any reassurance that that system is working for us and is going to support our schools?
If I can come in there.
Anwyn, I'll let you come in on the Mid Wales Education Partnership point, but just some reassurance around the data. We use a really comprehensive suite of data, which is not just local, but also national, some of which you've seen now. We also work to create peer-to-peer networks so that schools within Powys are currently supporting each other on their professional development. But it's also worth noting the amount of work that we undertake with schools outside of Powys to ensure that we're not insular and inward looking. And also to provide some assurance that those colleagues and schools that we work with outside of Powys are the right ones as well. They're the right ones to meet our need and to bring the challenge that we need to bring. So often, part of raising standards is seeing what the standard looks like.
See what good looks like. Yeah.
Seeing what excellent looks like.
Excellent,
but
yeah.
The work that we're doing to provide opportunities for our school leaders to go into other schools, to work with head teachers from Cardiff and from Swansea, is an important piece of work, so that we understand, along with the challenge and the support the authority brings, what schools of the highest standard look like. I come back to the point, we've got cracking learners and young people in Powys. Really, a really vibrant, bright, population of young people in Powys. And if we could get the standard in our schools, in all our schools, consistently in this authority, they would absolutely thrive and reach their potential. Part of that is about people within our authority seeing what it looks like to work in a really challenging schools with young people who haven't had the starts in life that some of the young children in Powys have, but what they attain and the progress they make is greater. I'll go to Anwyn for a response around the Mid Wales Education Partnership.
Okay.
Diolch. Before I come to the Mid Wales Partnership, I have a few elements there. So Councillor Angela, firstly, yes, you are right. Historically, there was a greater range of measures, but they have been pulled. But I can just reassure you that our next report will have even more detail. They come out at the end of January, where we can compare school to school. So that's another one that will be coming out, but they're not available yet, and will be in the public domain at the end of the month. However, you were thinking, I can exactly picture what you're thinking, the red, amber, yellow, green schools, of course. They actually was called categorisation, but it was pulled by Welsh Government at the same time as ERW came to an end. So it isn't because of ERW that you've not seen it at all. It was actually finished at a national level at the same time. So that's why that's not happened. However, from wearing another hat now, which is the Mid Wales Education Partnership, the MWEP, or Partneriaeth Addysg Canolbarth Cymru, working with Ceredigion, can I just reassure you that one of the key strengths we're having and seeing at the moment is where we're sharing effective practice. So a few of Powys schools have shared, as have Ceredigion, and our next sharing of effective practice, so that our leaders and teachers and TAs get to see what's happening across their own cluster or county borders, which is so, so important. Richard mentioned it before. We can't be insular. We can't be inward looking. We must look out. There is effective practice within Powys. Definitely there is. But we need to look beyond our borders. So our next expanding horizons is actually going across to Ceredigion and to some of their all-age schools to look at what they're doing there and their effective practice. As we've already mentioned, working very closely with Rhadir High School. That's been a very, very positive step in the right direction last term and this term. And I can't give you evidence, qualitative or quantitative yet, but initial qualitative is very positive and having the impact that we need. But it won't manifest it in numbers for probably 2 or 3 years. But those outward looking is really, really important to us and forms a big part of our improvement plans.
Okay, thank you for that. That sounds really positive, and you're saying all the right things, and it looks like you're looking to put in the right support. But of course, to a certain degree, our schools are fairly autonomous, aren't they? In that they've got their head teachers, their governing bodies. So what are you doing to make sure the schools engage? Because in the report here, you talk about 50 senior leaders attending the self-evaluation training. 50 seems quite low. How many school leaders are there in Powys, and what powers do you have to ensure that the schools engage with everything they are offering to help them improve?
Thank you. So that, yes, so it's 83 schools we have. Some, I think it's actually 79 leaders or head teachers when we consider the ones that are over different schools and different campuses. So what we do, you say rightly that we can't demand that they attend. That's their autonomy. However, we are tracking very, very closely a matrix of our schools and working with our SIAs. Any schools that are not engaging, we are approaching them to understand why, what can we do differently? Is it their capacity because perhaps they're teaching heads? Because that is an issue with us. And for those perhaps teaching heads, what has happened is the SIAs have gone and delivered bespoke for those because they couldn't be released from the teaching classroom. So, it is a combination. Perhaps they don't want to engage, but it is more often than not their capacity to engage. So we are tracking that very, very closely and keeping a close eye on it.
Okay, that's good. And I just wanted to comment that I think the new range of qualifications is great. I think, having a whole selection of vocational and academic subjects available in schools is brilliant. But, you've already highlighted there's going to be a challenge in how that's delivered. And that's got to be a cause for concern for us, isn't it, really, with some of our quite small schools. But what I wanted to focus on next was the issue for school with challenging behaviours. We've just heard the paper there for Bryn Lawr, and those are the children in the sort of extreme end of needing sort of specialist support. But we know that all of our schools have got increasing numbers of pupils with challenging behaviours, and that is clearly taking up huge amounts of our school staff time. And in these budget critical moments, schools cannot afford to have members of staff just dedicated. So teachers are being taken out of the teaching scenario to deal with children who are having issues within the school. So to my mind, that must be impacting on the academic attainment of that individual pupil, but also of the rest of the class. So really, I want to know, what we're doing about that, because it's great that we're offering vocational subjects for those who are less academic, but are we letting our more able and talented pupils down?
Thank you very much. So I will allow Simon, because it's part of the ALN and inclusion strategy where there will be significant consultation. But just to reiterate, we mentioned, perhaps you picked up on it before with the Bryn Lawr paper, Simon mentioning outreach. So there's a significant amount of work now. Many of our schools wanted team teach update training, so that programme has already started this term around updating their team teach, which is helping them to de-escalate situations where required and the steps needed to support that. We've also, around our professional learning programme, worked very closely with our Ceredigion colleagues as well and supported our NQTs with a very comprehensive positive learning behaviour strategies. And we were very lucky to borrow there was a virtual headset where they can help teachers to empathise with the challenges that many of our learners are coming to school with, the challenges they faced before even getting to school. So getting to school was a miracle. So that went down really well and was very important that we'd use that with our NQTs. But also, and I'm going to bring Simon in now, we are, as part of our, as I said, ALN strategy, looking at that positive learning environment and the strategies and the toolkits we want for our teachers across the local authority to support in changing behaviours in society. We've got to recognise that I could have got away 20 years ago with, I'll go and speak to your grandmother or your mother or your father, and that would have absolutely had the impact. But society has changed significantly, and we need to move with it. So Simon's going to come in with where we are with the positive learning environment that we're working towards.
I get that, Anwen, and Simon, yes, I look forward to hearing what you've got to say. That and I do know that an awful lot of work is going on to support schools, to support these pupils. But every time an individual pupil has a challenging behavioural episode, it takes half an hour, maybe half a day, maybe a whole day of that teacher's time. And that is the teacher's time away from the rest of the class, because there isn't another body person in the building to support that child in that incident. So whatever the strategy, it's time out of teaching time, isn't it? So yeah, anyway, sorry, and Simon, I'll let you tell us how your magic wand.
It comes back to that resource again, doesn't it? It keeps on coming back to resource, but I won't go there today. Simon.
Thank you. And I don't think there's a lot to say. I mean, you mentioned a lot of it, but I do think it's fair to say that I don't necessarily recognise the situation that you're describing there, Councillor Angela. I mean, I don't think we have teachers spending a whole day dealing with the behaviour of one pupil. Schools are skilled.
No, well, in those scenarios, it would be more than one pupil, wouldn't it, Simon? Because some schools have more than one pupil with challenging behaviours.
Yeah. And it's about how the head teacher utilises staff appropriately.
So are you saying, Simon, you don't recognise that the staff have to deal I don't really understand your statement. So if I'm a class teacher in a mixed ability class and 1 or 2 or 10, but let's just say it's one pupil is having an incident, you don't recognise that as the teacher, you have to deal with that incident. Therefore, there's no adult in the class necessarily.
No, I don't recognise that a teacher will spend a whole day with one pupil dealing with a behaviour incident. That's what I don't recognise, and I don't see that from behaviour consultation, from PIP referrals. That's not the picture we're getting.
Or an hour? You don't, right? Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Right, Chair, I'm going to leave it there. Yeah.
I recognise your frustration, Angela. Dr. Richards coming in.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. I think it's right to acknowledge the challenging behaviour in our schools. And, I can say this from experience myself. There are new sorts of challenging behaviours in our schools that we hadn't seen pre-pandemic, that we now see post-pandemic. So there's absolutely no doubt that our schools are being as proactive as they can be, but there are occasions where we have to be reactive because we're seeing different levels of challenge from individuals and from groups. There isn't a single solution to the challenge of behaviour in schools. Like we've spoken here just in the last 5 or so minutes of some of the different things that are happening across the authorities to support schools with challenging behaviour. I do think we have to recognise the challenging behaviour. If we're not honest about it, we don't actually put the right things in place to support schools. Councillor Ange, I think your point is right about, and it's a question that I ask myself, we're asking the service, how do we create the space in schools for our school leaders to concentrate on leading, teaching and learning, and for our teachers to teach? I think that's absolutely a fundamental question that we need to be asking ourselves, because otherwise we won't get our standards to where we need to be. Just the other point I want to make about behaviour, Curriculum for Wales offers us a real opportunity, and we're grabbing it to energise our teaching and learning to ensure that it's relevant for young people. And when teaching and learning is relevant and it makes them tick, and they get that fantastic sense that they're learning and progressing, you do see behaviour improve in schools. So I think there's an absolute need for us to concentrate on improving teaching and learning as part of the suite of things we do. In terms of suite, I think it's important to reference qualifications. The changes will come with some disruption, change does. But what the new suite of qualifications will offer us is the ability to offer young people in Powys qualifications that they want to do, qualifications that they see have value to where they see their futures. And I think that line of sight is also really important in that combination of engagement and good behaviour in schools. And then finally, just to comment on, so much behaviour management in schools comes down to those quality relationships that school staff, all school staff, head teacher, head of department, colleague who supports in the canteen, our caretakers, all of those staff in schools foster relationships with young people. And it's that connection between adults and children and that trust that brings a school community together to allow us to concentrate on being a whole. And I'm saying that, sorry if it sounds a little bit broad, but I want to make the point that there are so many strands to supporting schools with dealing with challenging behaviour, and lots of different parts to making sure that our learners are in school, engaged and ready to learn. Diolch, Chair.
Thanks, Dr. Richard. Councillor Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got 2 or 3 questions, and if I ask them all, I think there's one for Anwyn, one for Cressy, and one for Chris. The first one is for Cressy. In terms of Key Stage 5 outcomes, and how is that impacted by the large number of children that are leaving Powys to go for post-16 education? Does the authority have any evidence that it's those who gain the higher levels of GCSE results are actually going out for post-16 education? That's the one question. Question for Chris is, how is the new curriculum being funded from September 25? Is there extra funding going in to meet that extra demand? And then the question I think for Anwyn is, how does the funding issues we got in all our schools have an impact on both the attainments and the standards there and also on nesting outcomes?
I'll come in there first, and the answer is that I don't have that data. Chris James May is post 16 lead. If it's not something, we can have a look for you. It's not something we know. Chris, can I pass over to you?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to make the same point. We don't actually have that level of detailed data, Councillor Gareth, but again, it would be fascinating to see that. I'm also intrigued to know if that is having an impact on that. Obviously, we retain around just shy of 40% of the cohort. Over the last 5 years, the average retention is around 38%. So we just don't know. We just don't know the makeup of that in terms of who's left us to attend out of county provision. But
surely shouldn't we know? We know the children we had for GCSEs. Surely we should be tracking them through where they are post 16.
Yeah.
We know their results at end of year 11.
Yeah, and there's also a degree of personal choice in there as well.
I understand that. We're 5 or 6% below the Welsh average. Is that because we're losing 10% of the more able children, which I assume we are, because it's going to be those who can afford that are going out of county? I talked to a young lad from both. It's costing his parents £1,000 a year for transport to Hereford. Well, a lot of people in some areas, some of the more deprived areas, won't be able to afford that £1,000. So, I just think we ought to have that evidence, because I would have thought that's quite a key piece of data.
Yeah, I think it is. I'd agree with you, Councillor. It is obviously that would be useful data, and is something we can look into. The other end of it is, of course, there's with the challenges financially sixth forms in Powys are facing. There is an even more urgency on recruitment, and it does bring up the question of are we the learners who have progressed into post-16 provision in Powys, was that the best route for them? Do we have learners who maybe have gone on to a pathway which probably wasn't the best for them? I don't know. Again, these are all questions which come from that retention point you've raised there. And then in answer to the question you posed me, was it to do with the funding? Sorry, remind me, please.
I think I can come in
on. You said the new curriculum coming in from September 25 for year I assume that's for year 10.
Mhm.
I'm assuming that's going to result in smaller class numbers if you're going to a wider offer. It's just how's that being funded?
Anwen,
come in there?
Anwen's got to get in on this one. Go on, Anwen.
Yeah, diolch o galon, thank you. I think, can I just go back one step before around the funding, Councillor Gareth, is that okay? So just to reiterate around the pupil leaving from GCSE to Key Stage 5, we do have ALPS data. I haven't got it in front of me at the moment, but we are looking very, very carefully. ALPS looks at the value added from what they got at GCSE to A level. So perhaps when we come back, Chris, we can have a look and share the ALPS data that we have to answer that question. To go to the second question around funding from September 25, the changes in September 25 with the wave 1 and wave 2 won't be significant because it's just the just the GCSEs, the normal ones. It's from 27 onwards I'm concerned about when we start introducing the VCEs and the foundation. And that's why, ironically, this afternoon, the funding formula review is essential because we need to reflect that in the formula, and we will be bringing forward consultation papers on proposed changes to reflect that from September 27 onwards. It is, and I think probably more than ever, we've got to be able to offer that breadth. It comes back to Angela's question as well, Councillor Angela's question, yours as well. If we want our children to do well, even if we want to keep our teachers inspired, we need that breadth of vocational and academic subjects in our schools. But I'm going to say it, but within the funding envelope. But we need to make sure that the funding envelope is adequate for our schools.
Okay. Can I ask a question, Chair, if I may, on that one? So have you put that in as a budget pressure in the MTFP?
Not for 27 yet, because we need to calculate actually what it actually means and what it will look like, because the data and the information on the new qualifications is coming through all the time. We need to understand what does those VCEs and foundation subjects look like. Chris mentioned there's new measures. We need to look what those measures look like, what the suite looks like, so qualification. So Councillor Gareth, it will be in the FRM from next year onwards when we understand completely.
So at the moment, we have to assume it's in the £1 million for additional pressures. That's yet.
Yes, but there will be more detail coming through.
Okay. Sorry.
Did I answer? Was a third question?
Sorry, Anwen. The third question is what was the impact, what do you think is a perceived impact of the budget pressures that schools are facing, both on standards and also in the exam outcomes?
Sorry, my husband's just locked the dog in the room. So apologies. Sorry. Apologies for that. I didn't want you to have barking. What's happened is, and I'm really very passionate of this, as you all know, we undertook a very detailed piece of work around deep dives around our primary, special and secondary schools in the autumn term. And the reason, Councillor Gareth, was for us to ensure that our schools had the right conditions to accelerate their learning and teaching and provision. They had to be funded appropriately because the pressure, and it's come through, and hopefully as members you'll support the paper and the budget position next month, and hopefully you saw the paper in December, and hopefully all that was reflected in there. The pressure on our leaders and governing bodies in delivering balanced budgets and recovery plans, management of change processes cannot be underestimated. And that's why we as officers put that as and supported by our portfolio holder, that's why we put that as our first priority, to get the conditions right for our school leaders to be able to concentrate on the most important part, which is our learners and their progress. So in a short answer, Councillor Gareth, yes, it was a significant pressure.
Okay, linking back to that then, Anwen, are you intended to bring a paper to Scrutiny on the outcomes of the deep dives?
I'd hope that the paper that went to Cabinet reflected it. Or would we wouldn't bring the individual schools' reports, but we hope that the paper going to Cabinet reflected the key messages.
And perhaps Kath could circulate that to members of Zoom and pick that one up.
Okay, apologies.
Thank you. I'm going to say Councillor Angela is going to be the last comment question on this one really now, and then we'll look to conclude it. Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know this isn't about post-16, but as we've touched on that and talked about it, I just was curious what conversations have been had post-16 in terms of trying to keep our learners in county. So if we're going to offer this wider breadth of subjects, vocational, academic, years ago, you used to be able to do degree type courses through the local colleges. How any conversations gone on in that route, or looking at open university type learning styles? I know the council offers further education for its employees and it's supported through the council, but yeah, basically, has any conversation gone on there? Is there anything in the pipeline for the future that might mean our learners stay in county?
Chris has believed
Yeah.
that is happening.
Diolch. No, you are correct, Councillor Angela. There's a lot of work needs to go into how was this impact on pathways 14 to 19 as a whole. Currently, a lot of the qualifications which are tabled for wave 2 and 3, their specifications aren't produced yet. This is at the stage we're at in terms of the release of the specifications and what those actual qualification and assessment requirements look like. We won't see that for wave 2 until next year. So we've only got that for wave 1 qualifications at the moment. But you're right in the sense of the conversation around how are these quals going to feed into the full post-14 offer, for learners in Powys, if they are interested in a STEM pathway. Do they are those routes available? That's a discussion for me with the SMB and the OMBs of the Chweched leadership to ensure that we are getting the breadth right and at post-16 level. The financial challenges, as you're going to be fully aware, are there as well at post-16. So that is a challenge, but it will be something we need to look at going forward.
Okay, thank you. And if I could, Chair, just finally, I think we're hearing here that the financial challenges, we all know, is going to impact whatever we say. And I mean, I'm quite slightly optimistic because I think our school team there have got a handle on the challenges and are trying to put things in place to put them right. But I just have to go back to Simon. We had that fantastic document, that strategy, high-level strategy on ALN, and it was much praised by this committee. But I am disappointed that Simon does not recognise the reality of the challenge in the classroom. I am pleased that Dr. Jones recognises that behavioural issue is an issue and it is affected by finance, because you can have the best strategy in the world, but if you can't deliver it through lack of personnel, then it's meaningless, isn't it? But I just think it would possibly be useful if Simon were able to spend some time in the classroom and see what's happening on the grass floor, because the theory's great, but at the end of the day, it's what happens in real life that matters, isn't it?
I thought you were going to leave that there, Councillor Angela. I'll let you get away with that. Anwen, we'll let you come back and then I'll conclude on this one. Anwen.
And Angela, Councillor Angela, I just want to reiterate and really reassure you that there will be a full consultation starting for those waves in the ALN and inclusion strategy. And I think, and I wanted to support Simon. He does understand, and we will make sure that we absolutely listen to the voice of learners, of voice of teachers, voice of leaders and governors when we and all other stakeholders, parents and carers included, when we undertake our consultation now as part of the ALN and inclusion strategy.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. It's a difficult paper to read. It's because it's got things in there that we don't want to see. And please don't construe that we are anti anything. We're just disappointed that our standards aren't where they should be, and we know that you as officers feel exactly the same way. Angela did say and it was a good conclusion that you as officers have got a handle on it. And what I've sat quietly today in that little session, and you spoke about effective assessment, professional development, engaging students, collaborative approaches, and curriculum alignment. These are all good things to hear, and we support you in that. So yeah, difficult paper, but I think your proposal of coming to us quarterly, you've given us a starting point now, and I think we can be more effective at scrutiny to see that improvement. I'm going to say improvement because we don't want to see deterioration. So I think we've got a good starting point now, and please don't think that we're anti what's going on, but yeah, it's a difficult paper to read, and it's not what we wanted to see. And then sometimes we as councillors can be grumpy old souls, and we don't need to be. But yeah, we're supportive of you, and I want you to realise that. So thank you. Good. Yeah. Members, I want to conclude by one, if possible. We've got one item left, or two items left on our agenda. Item 8 is scrutiny recommendations. It's there, pages 131 to 134. Interestingly, it is in relation to the ALN report, which we've spoken to today. Any comments to be made on the comments coming back? Is everybody content that we've received responses to our comments? General scanning over it, there's been acceptance of some of our comments, etc. So hopefully our bit of scrutiny on that has helped them. Anybody got any comments to make on it? No? Okay, we'll accept them recommendations then, and that takes us to item 9 on the agenda, our work programme. There it is before you. Anybody got anything to add? We've been juggling our work programme around for some time now, so hopefully, and the 5th of February has got the alternative budget in there. I'm told that we will have one to consider now, so anything else we were going to put in there, we can't now really, so it'll have to be the alternative budget. And then we've got the draft budget on the 29th of January. I'm going to hopefully send some guidelines over in relation to scrutinising that budget. And then we've got that's the formulation of where we are at the moment. Any comment? Okay. Happy to close the meeting now, and if members wish to stay around afterwards, just for I do have to leave at 1 o'clock, so if we want a bit of committee reflection afterwards, please, committee members, stay on. But thanks for everybody. It seems to be a hard slog today, sorry everybody, but if anybody, thank you for officers and members for turning up. But if anybody wants to stay behind now and have a bit of committee reflection, more than happy to, up till 1 o'clock. Diolch yn fawr, everybody.
Diolch yn fawr, Chair. Thank you very much.